Welcome to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy with Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. This is episode 8, Hunter Biden, the laptop, the movie, and the truth. Our guests today are my two co-hosts from the Lads on Tour podcast, Dr. Ivor Mecton, PhD, and Frank from Stars of COVID. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Like, if my voice sounds a little bit scroachy, it's because I managed to tear my throat, which I didn't even know was a thing. But
you're suffering, aren't you? You were suffering.
Well, you know, I've hurt my neck. You've hurt your back, lads. Any body parts that you've got that maybe that rhyme?
No. I do have body parts that rhyme with back, but they're okay.
Good. It's almost like the universe was trying to communicate to us through song, but evidently
my
not.
neck, my back,
exactly. Exactly. This is it. So, but yeah, no, I'm all right. Other than that, it's that magical time of year, that traditional time of the year. Like, just to let people know, we've realised that we're actually being listened to by a lot more people than we thought in 47 different countries, which is so. Thank you to everybody for listening to us. You're absolute stars. But just to explain, in the UK and in America and various other countries, we have a tradition at this time of year. It's like getting to be an ancient tradition, really. Like, you can tell it's going to start when you get sort of the Christmas lights up and Christmas decorations, and you get sort of Christmas stuff in the shops, Christmas channels on the television showing Christmas films in the cinemas, Christmas music on the radio. And it's this fabulous, magical time that's appreciated by the children and the childlike, when about now, some twat is going to start complaining that the PC wokerati have cancelled Christmas.
I think it's already happened.
Well, there you go. See, the magic of the season has already arrived. That's it, and it's just a wonderful thing to behold every single year.
I feel this is another tradition that's been imported in from the United States.
Well, like so many things.
So thanks for that, boys.
Bless them.
If you say happy holidays, some right winger will slap you.
Nobody says that, though. Everybody just says Christmas in the UK. It's just, it's one of these manufactured things. Like, after the yearly traditional Remembrance Sunday being cancelled because it offends Muslims, which obviously has never happened in the history of the world. But again, it's important for countries to have these long-standing traditions. It gives you a sense of identity. And but apart from that, what else have we been up to, Brent?
It's been a very, very, very busy last 2 weeks. Well, last 2 months.
Absolutely. We've been on the BBC.
Yeah, we've been on the BBC. We were part of Mariana Spring's podcast, and you were part of the Panorama show.
Yeah, which just goes to show you what toadying to George Soros can get you. Like, you know, thanks to the big guy. That's a bit of foreshadowing for the show today. But yeah, thanks to the big guy, the chief, and for setting that up. But no, in all seriousness, it was an interesting experience, and hopefully we're actually going to get Mariana on the show to have a chat about it. So, you know, now we're rubbing shoulders with celebrities.
You're not rubbing shoulders with celebrities, you're shilling for the mainstream media.
It's the same thing.
And the 77th Brigade.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. And then the units and everybody else.
Well, yes, but, you know, what can you say? Like, you know, I want to meet Kanye West and Bill Gates. And this
don't bring up Kanye West, please. I don't think Kanye West is.
Yeah, that might be the elephant in the room, isn't it? That's like, you know, one of us, Brent. I mean, I don't want to name names or shame anyone, but one of us, Brent, said that Kanye West was a genius, and you know, obviously, recently he's out-whacked Alex Jones, which takes some doing, to be quite honest. Like, so what I find bizarre, so just in case anyone's missed this, Kanye West has basically been sort of almost groomed by Milo Yiannopoulos and Nick Fuentes, and is spouting out some wild shit, basically saying maybe we should like give the Nazis a second chance. I love Hitler. Not me, this is Kanye West saying that. And you know, hating on the Jews in a big way.
Yeah, nobody cropped that out of context.
Yeah. What he seems to be doing almost is like, it's almost like the sort of Jordan Peterson tactic of saying something horrific like maybe all women should be prostitutes for incels. And when people say that's ridiculous, going, oh, no, I'm just looking at this in an intellectual way. But I think Kanye's forgot the second part to his explanation. So
it's just hate, man. It's just fueled by hate.
Of course it is. It's terrible. It's terrible ignorance. And the man is clearly mentally ill. Like, this is what happens when you've got too much money and nobody will say no to you. Like, also, same thing with Elon Musk. But anyway, like, some people I've seen defending Kanye, right, saying that the most ridiculous is that he's infiltrating the right wing, the far right, to show how horrific they actually are. And it's like, I don't think we needed Kanye West to tell us how horrific the far right was. Like, some people have said that he might be playing 4D chess. I don't think so. I think he's playing pigeon chess. I'd even go so far as to say that he's the Bobby Fischer of pigeon chess. Now, if anyone gets that joke, then salute to you, because that involves a lot of things that you need to know, and you also need to think that this is funny. There's only a smattering of people on the planet that will actually care about that joke. But, you know, it amuses me. Anyway.
That's okay. Look, sometimes you do a joke just for you.
I often do it just for me.
I totally got it, because I'm, according to chess.com, when I used to play a lot, one of the top 10% of chess players in the world. So it's not that impressive, but
oh no, it's bloody impressive. Just so people know, Bobby Fischer was a grandmaster, considered by some to be the best in the world, and a la Kanye, he went completely tonto and started believing in the Jewish New World Order. So. And felt that the Jews ran the world. It didn't end well for him.
No, and it's been a very big moment for me of just saying, like, I cannot separate the art from the artist anymore. No, I stopped at the DEFCON 3 tweet. I was like, okay, I think I've had enough, man. I can no longer separate the art from the artist, because I had done that up until then. You know, I'd always been such a massive fan of his music. Being a producer myself, I had been so influenced by him for decades. You know, but I can't do it. I just cannot separate the art from the artist. You cross the fucking line.
I think it's sad. I think what we're watching with him and Elon Musk is an implosion. You're looking at middle-aged men that have suddenly lost their wives and probably their circle of friends, desperate to sort of get people to go, you're cool on the internet. It's the equivalent of like a middle-aged bloke going down to the skate park, but they're doing it digitally. Yo, teenage friends, let's hang out. I can get you booze. I can buy you drugs if you'll just hang out and tell me how cool I am. And it's like the equivalent of that. Like like that picture that Elon Musk put out of the guns on his desk. Somebody like quote tweeted that with like, this is the most divorced picture I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah. I saw it tweeted beside what do you call Nelson, not Nelson, Milhouse's dad in The Simpsons.
Yeah, I sleep in a race car.
Yeah. I sleep in a Tesla. Like, bless him. Like, but yeah.
Well, you want to be careful sleeping in a Tesla.
Yes, exactly. Drive off and kill you like Christine. Like.
No, because there was a story of a Tesla. It caught on fire, and because all the doors were electronic, the person couldn't get out.
There's that footage of the one that won't. They try and pull it over. It's a self-driving one, and it decides it grows sentient or something. I don't know, and it just drives off and crashes and kills the two passengers. Like, I immediately went down to my basement and got my guns ready and stuff like that. I thought, this is it. This is how it starts. Like, I became very suspicious of my toaster and threw it away. And you can't be too careful. Like, this is going to be how the robots take over. There
is a joke that people who don't know a lot about how computers would work will buy all this smart crap. And to be honest, I look around my house as a software engineer, and that's what I've done. But never mind. Whereas people who actually understand how computers work have in their house a toaster and a shotgun for if the toaster starts to act up. I don't really like how many things are smart, not because I think they'll go sentient and so on, but because if you're buying a smart plug from somebody on Amazon, some company you've never heard of. What you've bought isn't a smart plug. But what you've bought is a computer with a network interface, with an operating system you know nothing about, from a manufacturer that's going bankrupt tomorrow. In 5 years' time, the chances of that thing sending flipping biggest dickus emails to people is pretty much 100%, because it will get hacked, because the password will be root and the username will be root. Someone will SSH into it, put a script on it called send spam emails.sh, and it will send spam emails out to everybody. To me, that's the problem with all this smart stuff. Now I look around my house and I think that I'm a massive hypocrite. But it's true.
I mean, you could be a Nigerian prince in a year's time, emailing everyone if you buy that sort of computer.
Yeah, and all those emails are going to come from plugs and fridges and light bulbs.
Wow. I thought it was just my sort of, existential paranoia that I was going to be harassed by my toaster. But, like, Jesus Christ, is it going to actually happen? Well, that's chilling.
Oh, that's the idea of this show, isn't it? You guys look at conspiracies and things that are unnerving, trying to uncover the truth. And the truth of these things is we're installing a lot of computers that are very badly supported in our houses, and people are going to send dick emails from them.
Fair play.
Great.
No, that's not to say your light bulb's going to become sentient. No, it's not. It's just going to be sitting there dumbly sending emails out. Would you like a bigger thing?
It doesn't mean that it won't at some point, though. I'm still just... I'm not entirely...
staring at his light.
just not entirely comfortable with them anymore.
Your dumb light bulb isn't, because it's just a bit of filament, right? There's no decision. It's just it's not filament. Sorry, it's not the 90s. It's just some dumb LEDs. It's not going to do anything.
Or so they say. That's exactly what they want to believe, stars. Come on, man.
I think we need some fact checks here. Well, while you're here, guys, Ivor, you've got a book coming out.
Yes, I do, yeah.
Please tell us about it.
So essentially, it's a remake of the one I did from last year. I'm now, basically finished it. I'm just doing the proofreading. It's going to come out on, I said 15th, but I'll make it 16th because 16th is a Friday. But yeah, that's a super extended edition, more than 120 pages so far.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah, that will be, more than 20 pages added, so it's 280. But yeah, that contains all the updates on the COVID stuff, most of them, because the reality is a lot of the stuff has got super crank magnetism. And there's recently been a story which came out that Simone Gold, the one from America's Frontline Doctors, which had one of the members who said that, women have cervical cancer from having sex with demons. She's been caught misusing company funds to buy herself Rolexes, private jets, Lamborghinis, and all this. So she's been sued by the company.
What, Stella Emanuel or?
No, Simone Gold. Simone Gold, yeah.
Fabulous. Didn't Rainer Fulmick run off with all the money from the Nuremberg 2 fund as well?
There is discussion on that. I don't know how much this stuff's proven or what, but I'm like Mulder. I want to believe they took all the money and ran, because that's very funny.
Francis Hoare definitely did take the money and run, most likely.
And Kate Shemrani's lawyer ended up with a nice wedge. I don't think she got any of it, but I think...
because she didn't even attend the fucking trial.
No. Well, I mean, look at her. She's fragile, strong gust of wind, and bits will come off of her.
The natural nurse who's been injected about 50 times with Botox, yeah.
Yes, quite. Bless her. So, excellent. So when's that? In January or December, sorry?
It's December. So
fantastic.
16th, yeah.
And what's the title?
COVID-19, Ultimate Misinformation, Multiple Dead Dewormed Horses Edition.
Excellent. And where's it available?
Amazon. So you've got to pay Bezos to pay me. Yeah.
That's all right. That'll do us good, Say, I'll get back to George, and he'll be pleased with that.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So we're here today to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. And after finally seeing the film, I just want to extend my apologies to all three of you. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to make you watch such a terrible movie.
I actually enjoyed it.
Did you?
Yeah, up yours.
I like watching shit. Like I watched Died Suddenly. I've watched Watch the Water. I like watching that shit. It's fun.
Fair enough. I mean, it made Neil Breen films look like fucking Coppola, to be quite honest. But just to explain to everybody as well, what is Hunter Biden's laptop? Hunter Biden's laptop is a laptop that was found in semi-mysterious circumstances and purportedly has all sorts of information on there about the scurrilous activities of not only Hunter, but Joe Biden and his uncle James Biden. And these scurrilous activities range from drug taking, prostitution, financial crimes, corruption, American government policy being changed for the benefit of China, and bribes and the transfer of huge amounts of money in the Ukraine in order to prevent people being investigated, or so that is the conspiracy.
Also his dick.
Yeah, there's a lot of his dick involved. Like there is a huge amount. If you do research this, you will become intimately familiar with bits of Hunter Biden that you really didn't need to become intimately sort of associated with at all. But them's the breaks, I suppose. But yeah, and off the back of that, this has been going on for quite a while, like a surprisingly long amount of time. Like talks of corruption in the Ukraine involving the Bidens is basically as early as like 2018, coming from various sources. The actual laptop was discovered or dropped off at a laptop repair shop in 2019, but wasn't actually made available to the public until the following year, October 2020. Since then, there's been all sorts of different stories, lots of different people trying to make it prominent, trying to sort of get to the bottom of what's in it. And as well as that, we have a film produced by Breitbart, of all people. Breitbart, Breitbart, the news organization started by Andrew Breitbart, taken over by Robert and Rebecca Mercer and Steve Bannon. They've dipped their toes into the world of commercial films. And they've made a film called My Son Hunter, which is a satirical film that purports to show the whole story. So before we actually go into the story, we all sat down and watched the film. It's got Laurence Fox in it.
The sweaty fox.
Yeah.
Total asshole.
Yes, he's a total arsehole. Yes, this is completely true. He plays the title role of Hunter Biden. And yeah, the film basically sort of, what it does is it shows Hunter Biden sort of, he befriends a stripper / prostitute that he basically spends a series of days and nights with, telling his story and sort of almost confessing all the corruption that he's done through his life for Burisma, which is a company in the Ukraine, and for various Chinese banking associations and stuff like that. And he's confessing to this prostitute all about all these things that he's done. But the main sort of message is that really he's the sort of fall guy. He's in many ways like just the gopher for the big bad guy, Joe Biden, who they portrayed in this film as like a sort of hair sniffing and yet senile Bond villain, essentially.
Some like mafia villain, isn't he?
Yeah. There's a lot of that sort of like meeting in dark sort of car parks, getting into the back of limos, being sort of quite threatening and overtly sort of mafioso-like in the presentation. Whilst also trying to sort of present him as being senile.
As an oath.
Yes.
As they do continuously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the actor they got to play Biden, and neither Fox or the guy who played Joe Biden looked particularly like them.
No.
And I have more sympathy for them trying to get somebody who is like 1,000 years old and as slim as Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So the fact that this guy was, and if I get to his age and I'm that size, I'll be happy.
What was the character that was played by Gary Oldman in Hannibal? The bloke that was in bed that had his face eaten off, like by Hannibal, by his own dogs. I always thought that was a fair likeness of Joe Biden, to be fair. I can't remember his name. Mason Verger. I think that was his name. Yeah, Mason Verger. They could have gone with that angle. But, Each their own.
Well, they probably have to get somebody who's sympathetic to their views.
Yeah.
Totally.
As well, right?
The guy's been in stuff before. I can't remember who he was, but he's like an established actor. The bloke that played Biden, isn't he?
I don't know. He's way fatter than Biden actually is. I didn't notice that.
And taller.
To be fair to him, like, Biden's in pretty good shape for his age.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Like, there's nothing extraneous on Biden's frame.
Yeah.
No, this is true, and it was. A lot of people don't know that the film itself was directed by Robert Davi, and if people don't know who Robert Davi was, Robert Davi is the elder Fratelli brother from The Goonies, or Agent Johnson from Die Hard. And he's had a bit of a strange career. He's apparently very, very political, quite right wing. One of the sort of most famous things that he did an advert for the Republican Party that involved demon zombie sheep, if I recall correctly. Indeed, he did a voiceover for that. It was it's a thing to behold. Like it's certainly it's certainly a thing. It's definitely a thing, and that's available on YouTube if anybody's interested in that.
Be watching that later.
John James, that's who played Biden. Let's find out. Oh, he was in Dynasty. Bloody hell!
Wow, that's a throwback,
isn't it? Isn't it just?
Yeah.
And then the bodyguard is played by that woman who was in The Mandalorian that sort of compared her plight to the Holocaust, isn't it?
Gina.
Oh, yeah.
She's also in the cutscenes from Red Alert 3.
Oh, I've seen that, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There you go then.
What is she? She's a Soviet or a ally?
Yeah, she's the Soviet Tanya, I think.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, foreshadowing.
That makes two then, because the woman who played Tanya, Jenny McCarthy, anti-vaxxer. Yeah. So both the generals, well, apart from the Japanese one, are crazy in real life.
Whoever did the casting for that must be pretty bloody chuffed with themselves, I'll say.
Yeah.
Right, well done. Congratulations. So, what was everyone's sort of take on the film?
Yeah, so what my take on it was, is sort of like, it sort of started out where it was maybe like really general political stuff, like every liberal character speaks in the exact phraseology which conservatives always say they do. Like, we're on the right side of history, and that's just like, Black Lives Matter is mostly peaceful. I also noticed
it's so
that,
tropey.
Yeah, I also noticed that like all the Black Lives Matter people were white, or most of them in the opening scene. So I don't know, is that like a dog whistle? I don't know, because I'm watching a political film.
Of course it's a dog whistle.
Every scene, every part of the script was a dog whistle.
It was like a foghorn. Yeah,
I can't really like watch a movie I know is political without like pausing it every 5 minutes and saying, is that a dog whistle for that? Is that a dog whistle for that? Yeah. So, and it was so tropey, and then it sort of devolves into a bit more like a drama about Hunter Biden. You know, he's talking about his issues with suicide and, you know, how he's feeling his hole because his brother died because of a car crash, I think it was, or one of them died of cancer in his family. So I'm sort of thinking, you know, that's quite, you know, an interesting sort of, is this like a drama where he's filling that hole with drugs and it's about his life and all that, which I felt was the sort of best moment in the movie. Then like 30 minutes later, he's banging hookers with Petro Poroshenko or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? And Joe Biden's got a Superman cape on, and he's saying, "You better not ruin my erection." It's so ridiculous.
There's a very subtle sound effect at that moment. There's like a boing or something.
And then it's got all these obnoxious like cuts where he's got like his heart showing on screen. And then he takes cocaine, and then it shoots up. And then when he smokes some weed, it goes down like 10 times.
Crack. He smokes crack, and smoking crack, for some reason, slows his heart down. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever smoked any crack, but I'm informed that the opposite is true. And it's like, that was just one of the numerous fucking useless bullshit things. You noticed, right? You know, during the Black Lives Matter riot, I don't know whether anyone noticed this, they'd framed it so badly that the top of the news anchor's head was cut off on the screen.
I didn't notice that, no.
I didn't notice that.
It was
I also
shockingly poor.
I did notice one thing was that, you know, it's the same news network at the start, which is reports positively and runs defense for Black Lives Matter. that says, "Oh, Trump won." Yes, at the end of the movie, the same network.
Yeah,
but that doesn't make any sense. Also, there's another bit where she searches something on a website called Gigio, but then, like, when the black security guy comes in, he says Google 5 minutes later. Yeah.
About the framing of the head, that could be a conspiracy trope, that they're brainless.
It could be.
When you normally frame somebody with a part of their head cut off, like it's supposed to be mind control or saying that they've got like no brain. So I was wondering myself, like, he's playing into the conspiracy thing and he's basically saying she's brainless.
Maybe. Yeah, that could be it. I just took it as, I mean, you're doing that's perfectly legitimate. I'd not thought about it like that. I just took it as basically he doesn't know how to frame a shot. You know, what can you do? And like, yeah,
that's more likely.
But yeah, like as you said, the opening bit was just a sort of, it was almost like MAGA bingo, wasn't it? They said equity and feelings, and like, I did notice that for some reason in the riot they were throwing fireworks. I'm not entirely sure why they were throwing fireworks. Probably because the fireworks graphic is a lot cheaper than an explosion graphic. But who knows? Like, who knows what happens? But then, as the film progresses and it cuts to Hunter Biden in a club somewhere in Los Angeles, and he walks in, and like, this is where we start to see the sort of like what the film is trying to emulate. Like, because the shot as he goes into the nightclub is very clearly trying to be the bit where they go into the restaurant in Goodfellas, and there's a lot of breaking the fourth wall. There's a lot of shots that are stolen directly from Scorsese films. Like, that's stolen directly from Goodfellas. There's a bit where it shows the morning after a party, and there's an overhead shot as he gets up and walks through the sort of crowd of bodies. That's stolen directly from Wolf of Wall Street. There's a bit where pupils dilate, which is stolen directly from Requiem for a Dream. There's a bit where he talks to a dog, which is stolen directly from Road Trip, of all places. So at least he's been eclectic in where they've been stealing their source material from. But it just looks kind of cheap, basically. Like as he walks into the nightclub, did you notice when he puts the coke down, like he snorts a bit and then wipes away more than he actually snorted? I just thought that was particularly wasteful. Like, you know what was interesting? So because it's a conservative film, there's not actually a lot. In fact, there's no real nudity or swearing, and there's not a lot of drug taking even though it's supposed to be like a film about drug taking. I'll tell you one thing that did sort of get me as well. When the stripper who he gets to be friends with comes down the stairs. Right, okay. That's a fucking health and safety nightmare right there. Right, okay. Right, that
going on the stairs.
It's a spiral staircase with no handle. She's wearing heels, and then the silly cow leaves a bloody robe on the bottom two steps. What's that about? Like, absolutely ridiculous. Like, but
she can leave her bottom. She can leave her robe on my bottom two stairs anytime she likes.
Because one thing I noticed as well is that there's a random scene, like in that club, where there's two lesbians kissing, and then there's a random trans woman who's in it for like 2 seconds. She's completely inconsequential. And I'm just like, this is another dog whistle, isn't it?
Of course. The gag that they say doesn't even make sense. The trans person says, I'm he, him to you, and I'm she, her to your sister, so everybody's happy. And that's the sort of thing that MAGA heads will piss themselves out, going, oh, see, all over the fucking place, like a crazy woman shit. They don't know what the bloody hell they're going. But if you look at that and examine it, it doesn't make sense as a joke. It's not a good joke.
I didn't think that they're trying to portray that person as a trans woman, to be perfectly honest. I thought that she was, the madame of the establishment, and they were trying to say that. I thought what she was saying was, my pronouns are whichever means that you'll leave me alone. Is what I thought. So I've heard a story of a female flight attendant who was asked by some idiots going to a stag do, "Are you a lesbian?" And she replied, "I am if you're asking." And I thought it was that. I didn't think it was anything to do with trans stuff at all. Oh, I could be wrong. It's hard to tell with the film even though the film is, as I've got in my notes here, not a subtle film.
No.
It's also not a particularly well-made film. It reminded me of a really, really poor imitation of The Big Short in terms of the tone, in terms of the fourth wall stuff. The Big Short, by the way, is available for Netflix and Amazon Prime subscribers, and I'm sure you can get a free trial of both of those and watch that over Christmas. That'll be a much better use of your time than watching this. But the part near the start where the bodyguard lady out of Red Alert 3, Gina said, "This is." She turns to the camera and she says, "This is not a true story, except for all the facts."
Bazing.
It's hedging language, isn't it?
As we're going through the film, I wasn't sure which elements they were. There's some of it that I'm not sure which elements they're trying to present as true, and which elements they're not even trying to present as true.
But isn't that the point? That they can basically, anything that they want to say, is factual. They can go, yeah, wink, 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 wink. Of course it is. But if basically it was, I don't know, libelous or turned out not to be true, because that's just part of the film. That's the satire, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's almost as if they've set it up to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, so that's very true. Yeah.
The stripper / prostitute / missionary kid, Kitty / Grace. I don't know if that character exists at all.
No.
I literally watched the film and I don't know if she's supposed to be real or not.
Well, she's supposed to be real in the context of the film, but she's not. She's a device. Like, she's the person that ultimately takes the laptop to the reporter. Can we just have a quick word about the fucking reporter who's there with a pencil behind his ear, wearing a fucking trilby, like some guy from the 30s, on a typewriter?
Or an incel.
Yeah, it's literally like they've gone to clip art and gone, can we get a journalist? And we get some pictures, boys. That's the sort of like journalist that they've got. It's outrageous.
The Trilby's missing a business card that says press on it.
Exactly, that's all it is. I don't know whether you notice, when he stands up and he walks towards her in the park, his shirt doesn't fit. It's like 3 sizes too big. Like, unless he's dying, the poor sod, in which case I feel really bad. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
he's a news hound. He doesn't have time to be, neat and tidy.
It's outrageous.
He's too busy chasing the stories.
I absolutely pissed myself on that. It's like, why did they dress him as somebody from the 1940s? Why did he have an analog phone? Like, nobody has an analog phone anymore. What the fuck is that about?
If you want to see a fun film about the media messing with narratives, may I suggest Tomorrow Never Dies, which is on Amazon Prime. It's a bit pro-China for my liking, but it's good fun. And Jonathan Pryce is doing some amazing screen chewing. So that's Tomorrow Never Dies, alongside all the other Bonds on Amazon Prime. Sorry, continue.
Just for the record, we are not sponsored by any streaming services.
The film wasn't particularly accurate. You're asking about whether that woman is real. No, she's not. She's not a real character. She's just a sort of an amalgam of the concept that he had some strippers / prostitutes staying with him at various times. Like, even the people that are real in the film, they get them frighteningly wrong. Right? For example, there's a bloke called Zlakevsky. He's connected to this Ukrainian gas firm called Burisma. Now, in real life, he's bald and he's short. And in the film, he's the massive, great, tall bloke with long black hair and a beard. So for some reason, they've got him completely wrong. They've got Yankovic as basically a sort of big, fat guy with masses of grey hair. Now, in real life, he's a short, bald fellow. So I don't quite know why they did that.
But there is another Ukrainian who's short and bald in the film, so they got it opposite, yeah.
I assume, that might well be it, because so as to not confuse the audience. Patrick Ho, who's basically connected to a company called CEFC that Hunter Biden was doing dealings with in China, and is very probably a spy for the Chinese government. He's a short, fat guy in his sort of like middle age. And for some reason in the film, he's this tiny, thin lad that looks about 15 years old. So again, like these are indications that that basically the film isn't particularly accurate. Now, what are the things that the film proclaims? It proclaims that Hunter Biden got a huge amount of money from various places in the Ukraine, and that Joe Biden was also getting kickbacks for this, and there was corruption to the point where Hunter Biden was being investigated, and Joe Biden stepped in an official capacity as a member of the American government, and basically blackmailed the Ukrainian government into stopping investigating Hunter Biden. That's what it says. And it also says that he received a huge amount of money from the Chinese government, that he was working with Chinese spies, and also that he received $3.5 million from a woman who was connected to the mayor. She's the ex-wife of the former mayor of Moscow. So these are the things that are sort of expressed in the film, almost all through expositional dialogue, right? There's an idea in film that basically you show, you don't tell. Now, Robert Davi's clearly sort of missed that particular week of the course and has decided to fucking interminably tell you. But, again, that's his style.
And the way he's done that, what this film has reminded me of is reenactments from Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes.
Or some sort of TV show like that. That's what this film is. It's like a reenactment. It's not actually a film. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, that's about the level of it. Sort of like Crime Watch and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes, that's spot on.
That's what how the dialogue is how it's shot, is how the acting is, everything.
Absolutely.
Another thing what sort of I found obnoxious was it sort of starts off as a bit more of a serious drama, and then everyone's breaking the fourth wall half an hour later. It's really inconsistent.
It's really, really overused, the breaking of the fourth wall. So if you take The Big Short, which is, it's about a different subject matter, but it's basically, what if this film about something else made by people who knew what they're doing? They break the fourth wall, I think, 3 times. And 2 of those are sort of cameo roles by people who don't appear in the film at any other point. So you've got Margot Robbie in the bath. You've got Richard Taylor and Selena Gomez talking about financial products. I think... No, sorry, there's 4. There's 4. There's those 2 times we've got new characters introduced just to break the fourth wall, playing themselves. You've got the 2 guys who discover business plans at the reception of, I'm going to say Lehman Brothers, I can't remember. And you've got Ryan Gosling's character at the end. But they're short. It's very clear what's going on. On that, the fourth wall gets broken down like it's the Berlin Wall. I half expected to see David Hasselhoff on top of it playing Looking for Freedom.
Very good. Yeah. No, well, again, it's clear that he's tried to pinch stuff from... Scorsese in The Big Short, did Wolf of Wall Street.
No discipline.
Oh no, it's crap. We said before going on, it's a bad idea. If you're going to steal stuff, you don't steal from people who are the best in the business, like Scorsese and stuff like that. It reminded me of when Brian Harvey of E17 decided to put out a diss track over an Eminem beat. And it's people are immediately going to compare you to Eminem, and he's rather good and you're not. So, it's the same thing basically with this. You're immediately going to make comparisons to, as you say, The Big Short, Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, and American Psycho as well. There were clearly times when Laurence Fox was trying to do his crazy Patrick Bateman, but he just didn't go far enough for me. He seemed to phone in the performance. There's a bit when him and the prostitute sat there chatting about Bo and about how it's affected him in his life, and there was an inkling where I hate the guy, but I could tell that the guy could actually act. He's rather trained. Not in this film, he couldn't act, and not in anything that I've seen, obviously. but that gave me the impression that he probably could if he'd bothered.
There's a glimmer.
Yeah, if he bothered to put the effort in. But the whole film came across as under-rehearsed and underdeveloped. What's interesting is that he gets the voice wrong.
Yeah, because I actually noticed that he starts off with an American accent and he sort of loses it towards the end of the film. Was I the only one?
That's just laziness. But what the point I'm making is that I didn't realise that Hunter Biden's got quite a high, whiny, slimy voice. And And if you wanted, he kind of sounds like, you ever seen Gummo? He's a bit like the sort of weird kid that kills cats and lives with his grandma. Like, he's very sort of fey. And if you were a talented actor, you could make that into a sort of Grimer, Wormtongue, sort of slimy, sleazy, almost sort of reptilian sort of guy. But Laurence doesn't bother to do that. He decides to basically do a sort of shit impression of the bloke from the Crash Test Dummies, but only for the first half of the film until he forgets what he's doing and then just carries on.
And it's very strange that they missed that, because the film is absolutely an attempt to say the Bidens, a bunch of bastards.
Yeah.
And that, Grima Wormtongue character in the Lord of the Thrones or the King of the Rings or whatever it was, is such an unsympathetic character, and it feeds into so many sort of sleazy tropes. It's perfect material.
Yep.
And they didn't use it. They don't even execute well in their own terms for what they're clearly trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah. That was my point. It fails as a hit piece because they can't decide whether to make Hunter sympathetic or a bastard, basically. And and this is it. I think it would have been far more interesting if they just made him a bastard, basically, throughout the entire film. But for whatever reason, they don't.
I came away with sympathy for the guy.
I did a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I don't think they wanted to portray that, because to them, those things that we find sympathetic, they find as weaknesses. So they were putting them on screen for the conservative audience to laugh at, essentially.
Yeah. And then right at the end as well, there's something that really, really doesn't work. Like that she's decided to give the sort of the laptop away for the greater good or whatever, blah, blah, blah. She's become fully red-pilled by that bodyguard, Tyrone. Anyway, and then a sort of montage starts with this music. And what got me was like, this music doesn't fit. This music doesn't fit at all. And then the singing starts, and I thought, this music doesn't fit, and it's not very good music. I wonder why they've decided to use this. And then it's dawned on me that it was a Laurence Fox song. And
what? He actually made songs?
Oh yeah! Oh,
I didn't know that.
No, he tried to, like, this is the thing. He decided to knock. He didn't have a midlife crisis because Billy left him. That's not what happened. He just decided.
It is a midlife crisis.
Exactly. He quit acting and decided to become a musician. And he does this sort of rather earnest acoustic singer-songwriting stuff. But the problem is, and I appreciate that all art is subjective, but the problem with Laurence Fox is he's not very good. Like, he's just not very good. Like, so it's just not particularly done well. And if you put on top of not being very good that you're a very unpleasant person, people are less likely to sort of want to, I mean, John Lennon, by all accounts, could be a bit of a nasty sod, but he couldn't half pen a tune. Like, as Brent will tell you, he'll forgive Kanye for all sorts of stuff. You know what I always thought was interesting as well? There's a lot of parallels between Hunter Biden and Laurence Fox.
Oh, yeah?
Like, both of them were in trouble at school, both sort of pretty much expelled, both born into a family that put huge amounts of pressure on them to succeed, that have got this well-known family name. Like the Foxes, like, his father and his uncle were famous actors, his grandparents were famous actors. Fox was actually expelled from school before his A-levels, but then got into RADA, probably because of, you obviously need a degree of talent, but I think coming from the Fox acting dynasty probably helped. Both of them had their problems with the law. Both of them have had problems with drugs. Both of them have been given incredible opportunities pretty much based on who they are and who their families are. Both messed up their careers. Both got divorced. Both are artistic, like they have sort of, artistic ventures. Both are connected to politics in different ways. Laurence Fox famously got a huge amount of money from the Institute of Economic Affairs and started that dreadful Reclaim UK party. Both considered disappointments, pretty much, that really didn't fulfill their potential, and both have had their rulings with the law. So there are a huge amount of parallels between Laurence Fox and Hunter Biden. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Laurence Fox wishes he was Hunter Biden. Like Hunter Biden is like sort of Laurence Fox, but actually came out of it smelling of roses. Whereas Laurence Fox is, well, he's Laurence Fox.
Came out smelling of foxes.
Yeah. The Hunter and the Fox. I feel I feel a tawdry biopic coming along.
Yeah. Did anyone else notice that really obnoxious sound effect they had to put on whenever there was fact check on the screen?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was so.
Oh, this is the thing, right? So the constituency that they're appealing to, has been pilled against the very idea of fact checking. So it's like, if it requires a fact check, it's true. So if I were to tweet, "Pee is stored in the balls," and somebody did a fact check of that would become true because somebody fact checked it. And the way they treated the media throughout, first of all, like it's one big amorphous blob, except for Fox.
Yeah.
There was a quote. So do you remember whenever Trump literally at some campaign rally or something said he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and people would still like him? Biden in this film, Joe Biden, I think in the back of the car, started a sentence literally with, "I could be in the middle of Fifth Avenue and whatever," and the media would still go on about Trump. It was so blatant and so oversimplified. I mean, look, I think we probably all have things about how the media works that we don't like. I think most journalists would as well. I think
totally.
if you get Mariana Spring onto this podcast, I'm sure she would have things to say about how most journalism works that she wouldn't like. But to say it's all the same thing and to say it's that simple and that reductive, it's ludicrous.
One thing I also noticed is there was that scene where the bodyguard woman, can't remember her name, breaks the fourth wall to say like, "Oh yeah, Joe Biden, he likes this on his coffee or whatever." I can't remember what it is. And then they're like, CNN reported that. But the funny thing is back during the Obama administration, they gave like a load of crap to Obama for having a certain type of mustard on his burger or something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the exact details, but it's like...
Was it French mustard?
Yeah, Dijon mustard on his hot dog or burger. I can't remember, but...
That's tantamount to communism.
That was what they said at the time.
They went on about Obama because he wore a light-coloured suit.
Yes.
Good on the guy, to be perfectly honest. Not that it matters, but they went on about that for a week.
Yeah.
Did you notice as well, I thought it was very interesting where Carino, I think her name's Carino, turned around to the camera and said, "Epstein didn't kill himself, by the way."
Yeah, that was immediately after, yeah.
If I wanted to kill somebody, Epstein's death is absolutely the first thing that I would use, because I'm not saying that he didn't kill himself, by the way. I don't know.
But I know you guys our show.
I'm halfway through that one. I need to finish it.
You should do short episodes. But you know what? I can understand why people would immediately be suspicious of that. I wouldn't lead with jet fuel can't melt steel beams. I wouldn't lead with, the moon landings being fake. It is in order of magnitude more plausible than those things. So the fact that she turns to the screen and says that, which she even says is a little off topic, is very, very interesting, because it's sort of like, what's the most plausible thing that isn't if you like, a mainstream narrative? So we're not going to talk about bloody weaponized birds in Ukraine or something, because that's we're going to talk about this because it's plausible. And it's just a way of subtly pilling, just starting that process of subtly pilling somebody. As any number of people will sit at home and go, that's probably true. Any number of people will do that for that conspiracy versus, almost any others. I thought that was really an interesting thing to have happened in a film which has nothing to do with that at all.
The other thing that it does is it tried and failed, but again, it's preaching to a sort of a converted audience anyway. It tries to basically explain that the impeachment of Donald Trump, where essentially he said to Zelensky, "I will hold up military aid for the Ukraine unless you investigate the Bidens and their corruption in Burisma." They try and basically say that the two things are comparable. And we will come on to this when we explain the thing, but they say that basically Biden actually withheld money from the Ukrainian government in order to stop an investigation, and that's a quid pro quo. And so in order to cover that up, not only did they cover it up, but they also blamed Trump for doing the very same thing that the Bidens had actually done. Now, that's not actually true, but this is what is portrayed in the film, that basically the entire impeachment of Donald Trump was nothing to do with him phoning the president and literally saying, "If you don't do this, I won't give you that." That apparently, that's all. That's fine. But when the Bidens did it, that's bad, apparently, according to the film. And that was sort of the whole point of the impeachment, was sort of a second layer of covering up for the Bidens, which is obviously nonsense.
Yeah, I mean that with the the Fifth Avenue stuff, the whole film was a sort of a boing flip on every accusation that's been made on Trump. It was like, no, your boy did that, not ours.
Yeah.
So many times direct parallels to what Trump did or what criticisms have been made of Trump. They just tried to reverse them.
Like Missy Elliott, in fact.
Yes, very much like Missy Elliott.
Except Missy Elliott's good at her art.
So I think we can safely say, to quote Spinal Tap, it's a 2-word review: shit sandwich.
Yeah.
So
pretty much.
Yeah, it's not a very good film. Like, it fails on everything that it tries to do. It's not a funny comedy. It's not a particularly good satire. It's amateurishly shot, amateurishly acted, and doesn't actually make any sense if you actually scrutinize it with any great sort of detail.
I got one good thing to say. All right.
Go on.
And that is, they made it very easy for you to purchase it, download it, and watch it.
That's like praising measles for being really contagious.
Well, Back to the Future 1 to 3 are on ITV Hub, which you don't even need to purchase to watch. I haven't got through half the films I wanted to get through as being good. So,
are you sponsored?
No, I'm not. I'm not paid.
On the other hand, I would just like to say that chocolate oranges are available in Rawlinson's.
My only commercial interests are, I started with about £1,000 of shares in Novavax, which is now £100 of shares in Novavax. So don't listen to me for shares advice. Yeah, no, I'm not going to go through all my films. I might tweet them out later on. Look out for that. The Stars Film Guide.
You're better than Melville, because he put all his money into Bitcoin, or at least quite a bit of it, just before it dropped off.
Oh yeah, that was
oh dear.
Yeah, my Novavax shares. I mean, I did okay with other shares, which I've since sold, but the Novavax ones were bad. There was a plot twist towards the end, right? Grace has a tape recorder which is given to her by Tyrone.
Yeah, the blackface of white supremacy.
Yeah. Oh God!
I remember that line. Yeah.
Oh, that was so dumb.
That was such a foghorn. That one was the biggest foghorn in the film.
Yeah, that was. But he gives the recording device to her. Then they put on the music scooter or whatever it was, and it becomes clear she's been recording the whole time. But they filmed that out of sequence, but not in a clever way. It wasn't like Dunkirk, They did that to put in a surprise. It was very like a Dan Brown novel. It was very like that. What do you call it? The one that was successful despite being the first one of his books that was really big.
Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code.
Inferno.
Yeah, so somebody snuffed it on about page 4 of that, and their body's left lying in a way which is interesting, and they keep going on about, I can't believe the body is left like that, blah 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 blah.
It's like the Hangman.
3 million pages later, they tell the reader, after all the characters have found out about it, why the body's left lying like that, and the whole thing is just to build suspense. But it's so artlessly done. And filming that out of sequence, where she's not given the recording device to the end of her time, as she says to Tyrone, "I'm done," and it looks for all the world like she's walking away from the whole situation, just getting out of there, is so lazy and so reductive. The director they should have copied is Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood's films do not do any of this nonsense. They just tell the story nice and simply, just no fourth wall breaking, no out of sequence stuff, because they can't handle that, right? The guys who made that film cannot do the things that they've tried to do in the film. And that example to me is so egregious. I know, Neil, that you were wrapping up on the review, but I couldn't leave that alone.
No. Dead right, mate. Dead right.
And I don't know what streaming service Gran Torino is on, so I appeal. But seek it out.
The film had 2 fact checks, right? And I think it probably needed another 40 or so. So,
well, that's what we're here for.
I would have shot my TV. I'd have got a gun license. I'd have got a gun, and I'd have shot my TV if there'd been 40 fact checks in that film with that big obnoxious font.
But it definitely needed it. So that's why we're here today. So let me hand it over to Mr. Panorama himself.
Okie dokie. So, Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, the first time we heard about the specific laptop was considered a bit of an October surprise. Now, it came out in the New York Post in October 2020. Now, this wasn't when the laptop was dropped off, but we'll get into that because it's a bit of a complicated timeline. But in October 2020, the New York Post ran with the title, "Smoking Gun Email Reveals How Hunter Biden Introduced Ukrainian Businessman to VP Dad." And this was a story that was written by a woman called Emma Jo Morris. Now, Emma Jo Morris, it's a little curious as to why she wrote this, because she'd never actually written anything before. She wasn't a published journalist. She'd previously worked in a sort of editorial capacity, I believe, for Breitbart News, and she'd worked as a guest booker on Hannity and Combs. She worked specifically with Sean Hannity, the news guy that looks like a sort of bully from a 1980s film. Him.
Yeah, because he is a bully from a 1980s film.
This is true. So she wrote this story, and it's bizarre because this woman has never actually written any stories before. She's only ever written 3 stories in her entire life, all published by the New York Post, all about Hunter Biden. Whether there's any significance to this, we shall find out. But the story said, Hunter Biden introduced his father, then VP Joe Biden, to a top executive at a Ukrainian energy firm less than a year before the elder Biden pressured government officials into firing a prosecutor who was investigating the company, according to emails obtained by the Post. So what's happened is they've got these emails from Hunter Biden's laptop, and this is the story of corruption that unfolds. Vadim Pozharsky, who's an advisor to the board of this big Ukrainian company called Burisma, he said in an email, "Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and for giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. Reality is an honor and a pleasure." And he's obviously misspelled really there. So this board advisor to Burisma has emailed Hunter Biden, who also works for Burisma at the time, basically saying, thank you for introducing me to my father, to your father, or so it would seem. And the New York Post thinks that this is suspicious. This is an early email from May 2014 from Pozharsky to Hunter, was asking for advice on how you could use your influence on the company's behalf. And so the board members are basically asking Hunter how he can use his political influence to benefit the company. And this has turned up in the emails. Other emails and other files that were recovered from this laptop show him having sex with prostitutes and sometimes just on his own, and smoking crack, sometimes with prostitutes, sometimes on his own.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Whenever you say having sex on his own,
yes,
You mean
Yes.
the obvious? Okay. I'm not sure why he recorded that, but never mind.
Who knows? Who can say? Like, it's each to their own. Like, I've never really been tempted myself, but yeah, who knows? Perhaps it was part of maybe that's what you have to do to get to work for these large like Ukrainian gas firms. Who knows? But anyway,
sounds like a skull and bones ritual to me.
Oh, possibly. Anyway, so to support this, what the article actually does is it shows the supposed signature of Hunter Biden on a slip that was with the laptop when he handed it into this Delaware repair shop in April 2019. So they seem to have evidence that it actually was there. And it says that the laptop was dropped off in 2019, but Mac Isaac couldn't identify Hunter because he is legally blind. Pimp Squad, baby. POP. I'm going to say that every time the phrase legally blind comes up until it becomes funny. And if people don't know that meme, well, then you haven't lived. So he didn't know this guy because he's legally blind, right? And so he couldn't recognize who he was, but he sort of figured out that it was Hunter Biden because the laptop had a Beau Biden Foundation sticker on it. So anyway, this the bloke that ran this shop was called John Paul Mac Isaac. That's his name. He's got this very strange sort of 4 times name. And what happened was he made a copy of the hard drive. He was going through the hard drive and he saw illegal activity on there and he felt that he needed to report this. So he made a copy of the hard drive and he gave one copy to the FBI. And according to the New York Post, he gave another copy to Rudy Giuliani. He actually also sent them off to a couple of other senators, one of them which was Jim Jordan, but they basically just ignored it. So the New York Post continues, less than 8 months after Pozarski thanked Hunter Biden for the introduction to his dad, the then vice president pressured the Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko and the prime minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk into getting rid of the general prosecutor Viktor Shokin by threatening to withhold $1 billion in US loans in December of 2015. And then it quotes Joe Biden, and this is all on film. It says, I looked at them and I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor isn't fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, he got fired. Now, Shokin, who was the prosecutor general at the time, according to the New York Post, had made specific plans to investigate Burisma that included interrogations and other criminal investigation procedures into all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. So what they're suggesting is that Joe Biden withheld US government money from the Ukrainian government until they got rid of Viktor Shokin, because Viktor Shokin was about to investigate the company that Hunter worked for, and by inference, he was going to also investigate Hunter Biden. So in order to protect Hunter, Joe has basically said, we're not giving you this money unless you fire that prosecutor. That is the allegation that the New York Post has come out with, that it claims it found the evidence for on the laptop. So NBC's Savannah Guthrie asked Biden Sr. in February 2019, was it wrong for Hunter Biden to take that position, knowing that it was really because the company only wanted access to you? So this is a different reporter has already raised the question, is it right for Hunter Biden to be working for Burisma? And Biden responded at the time, that's not true. You're saying things that you do not know what you're talking about. And so he just basically denied it. So which kind of looks a bit suspicious, to be quite honest. And later, Joe Biden was actually heckled at a Democratic primary, and somebody shouted, why are you sending Hunter to Ukraine to get a job and work for a gas company? He had no experience with gas or nothing, in order to get access to the president. So it's not the catchiest of heckles, but basically it is succinct in what it's trying to get across, that basically he's protecting Hunter, and Hunter's only got this job because of the access to the vice president that this would afford. And in response to this, Joe Biden acted with decorum. No, he didn't. He turned around and called the bloke a big fat guy and told him that he could do more press-ups than him. which, it's not brilliant, if we're brutally honest.
No.
But anyway, this was the sort of first foray into the supposed corruption of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And what sort of preceded this in May of that year was a tape that was released via Rudy Giuliani and a bloke called Andrzej Derkach. And this was a tape of a supposed recording of Poroshenko, who was the president at the time, and Joe Biden essentially having an extension of this argument, basically saying that he was blackmailing him into not looking into Hunter, and this was where sort of it piqued everybody's interest. Now, the reason that basically this tape was not taken seriously by a lot of people is because Derkach has got connections to both Putin and the KGB, and so the provenance of these particular tapes was, even at the time, was thought to be in doubt, and so a lot of people didn't really sort of pay any attention to them. But then, luckily, the New York Post got hold of these emails and stuff, which seemed to sort of back up the idea that may well have occurred. Now, the second New York Post article that came out the same month was also by Emma Jo Morris. Again, this was the second article that she'd written in her entire life. But here's what was strange about this article. For some reason, a lady called Gabrielle Fonrouge, who is an established byline journalist, her name was also added to the piece. Now, she says that she had nothing to do with the piece and didn't understand why her name was added to the piece, and some have speculated that it might have been to give a degree of credibility to a story that some people were already saying that was a little bit sensationalized, potentially. And if we remember, Emma Jo Morris had previously worked for Breitbart and Sean Hannity. Anyway, the second story was even more salacious. It said emails reveal how Hunter Biden tried to cash in big on behalf of the family with a Chinese firm. And it says Hunter Biden pursued lucrative deals involving China's largest private energy company, including one that he said would be interesting for my family. One email sent to Biden on May the 13th, 2017, with the subject line, expectations, included details of remuneration packages for 6 people in an unspecified business venture. Biden was identified as the chair/vice chair, depending on which deal with CEFC went through, and his pay was pegged at $850,000. So what these emails are revealing is that he's got an incredibly high-paid job to work with this company, this Chinese company called CEFC. Now, in the emails, in addition, the email outlined a provisional agreement under which 80% of the equity would be split among 4 people. H, being Hunter, got 20% of this 80% equity of the company. Now, this is the smoking gun. The email said 10 held by H for the big guy. Now, H is Hunter, and the big guy, it is suggested, refers to his dad. And so what this is suggesting is that if the business deal was going to go through with CFC, 80% of the equity would basically be split among 4 people, and 10% of that would be set aside to go as a gift, essentially, to Vice President Joe Biden. Although at the time, this is 2017, so he wasn't the vice president, but he was still involved in politics. And basically, so he's trying to invest in CEFC offshoots, and he set aside 10% for his dad. Another email sent by Hunter in August of 2017 concerned a deal that was struck with the chairman of CEFC, Yi Jianming, for half ownership of a holding company expected to provide Hunter with $10 million a year. So he's getting paid $10 million a year in one venture and $850,000 a year in another venture with this Chinese firm, CEFC. Now, interesting, Yi Jianming, who's the person that's behind this deal, was arrested and vanished in 2018, so just a year after this deal was taking place. And the suggestion is that maybe he might have been disappeared by the Chinese government. He's previously been involved in the Chinese military and the Chinese Secret Service. So it's not really somebody that it looks good for a son of an American politician to be involved with. Now, Biden also wrote in these emails that Yi had sweetened the terms of an earlier 3-year consulting contract with CFC that was to pay him $10 million a year for introductions alone. So his job that he was getting $10 million a year for was simply to be a schmoozer, to try and introduce people to the company and introduce the company to people in order for them to invest and or whatever it is that rich Chinese people do. And Hunter wrote in one of the emails when they were discussing creating this holding company, which was to be called Hudson West. Hunter wrote in an email, "This is so much more interesting to me and my family." And so he's very much looking like the New York Post might be onto something here. There's 10% set aside for his dad. He's saying that basically, this is looking very interesting for my family. Yeah. And these are emails that are purportedly off Hunter Biden's laptops that are from Hunter Biden involving this deal. The documents obtained by the Post also include an attorney engagement letter from 2017, in which one of Yi's top lieutenants, a gentleman called Chi Peng Patrick Ho, who was a former Hong Kong government official and suspected Chinese spy, he agreed to pay Biden $1 million retainer for legal counsel to matters related to a U.S. law and advice pertaining to the hiring and legal analysis of a U.S. law firm or lawyer. Basically, what happened is Patrick Ho had got into trouble trying to bribe certain African countries. Yes, like in a sort of almost like a sort of coup thing for the Chinese government, and he was found out about this, and he ended up actually serving jail time. But he paid Hunter Biden a huge amount of money just for legal advice, essentially, and kept him on retainer. Mm-hmm. In December 2018, he was convicted of 2 schemes to pay $3 million in bribes to high-ranking government officials in Africa for oil rights in Chad and lucrative business deals in Uganda. And he ended up serving a 3-year sentence. So Hunter Biden wasn't able to help him, but he certainly received, or it seems to have received, a huge amount of money from them at the time. The third New York Post article was written by a lady called Miranda Devine. Now, Miranda Devine has actually written a book about this as well called The Laptop from Hell. And this is apparently the go-to book if you want to find all the sort of juicy, salacious details. But she wrote an article in the New York Post, and this was in May of 2021. It said, Hunter Biden brought VP Joe to dinner with shady business partners. And so what this is talking about is the meeting that was discussed in that first email. If you remember, the email came from the guy from Burisma saying, thank you for introducing me to your father. They've found out more details of that. Joe Biden met with Ukrainian, Russian, and Kazakhstani business associates of his son at a dinner in Washington, D.C., whilst he was vice president, records on Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop show. The dinner, on April 16, 2015, was held in the private garden room at Cafe Milano, a Georgetown institution whose catchphrase is, where the world's most powerful people go. The next day, Hunter received an email from Vadim Pozarsky, an executive of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, to thank him for introducing him to his father. Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. And this is the same email that we've heard previously. And the New York Post says that at the time, documents reveal that Burisma was paying Hunter Biden $83,333 a month, which is not bad work if you can get it. And
it's a good wage.
It's not bad, is it? It's not bad at all. So what happened was, on March the 26th, Hunter emailed the son of Alex Karloutzos saying, Dad will be there, but keep that between us now. And Alex Karloutzos is basically, he's connected to the Greek Orthodox Church, and there was a priest there that Joe Biden wanted to actually meet, and that was why he was there. But this was the opportunity for Hunter to introduce these Ukrainian businessmen to his father, and this is what the New York Post thinks is dodgy. And the email said, okay, but the reason for the dinner is ostensibly to discuss food security, because at the time, Hunter Biden's was working for the World Health Organization on the World Food Initiative Program or something like that. We'll figure that one later. But he says that the guest list included Russian billionaire Yelena Bakhturina and her husband, the corrupt former Moscow mayor Yuri Lutskov, who has since died. Bakhturina wired $3.5 million to Rosemont Seneca Thornton LLC, a Delaware-based investment firm co-founded by Hunter and by Devon Archer. The wires were flagged in suspicious activity reports provided by the Treasury to a Senate Republican inquiry into Hunter that began last year. And the guest list included Vadim, who is thought to be Pozarski, who's the bloke from Burisma. But essentially, the other tantalizing thing here is that essentially a firm that Hunter was connected to received $3.5 million from the wife of the former mayor of Moscow, and it isn't clear, according to the New York Post, why such a deal happened. So just to give a little bit of background, so Burisma is a holding company that's set up in the Ukraine. It basically is a holding company for a group of energy exploration and production companies. How exactly it works, I'm not entirely sure, but it seems to make a huge amount of money from extracting and selling natural gas. It was founded in 2002, and it's a major shareholder of the Sunrise Energy Resources in Delaware, and it exports energy from Ukraine and Kazakhstan, and has 35 gas production licenses in the Ukraine. So there is actually a sort of business connection to Delaware, and Delaware is famously where the Bidens are from. But by 2016, it was the second largest privately owned gas producer in the Ukraine. And it's owned by a company called Broccoli Investments, which is based in Cyprus, and it's owned by a chap called Mykola Zlukevsky. Now, Zlukevsky is the bloke that's in the Hunter Biden film. He's portrayed as big bearded and long black hair, but doesn't look anything like that in real life. And he was the Minister of Natural Resources under the previous President Yankovic. Now, in April 2014, the UK Serious Fraud Office was investigating Zlukevsky for money laundering, and for some reason, the Ukraine failed to cooperate. And this is what started the investigation by Viktor Shokan. Can I just say, this has been getting on my nerves for a while now, because people are talking about Hunter Biden using money for laundering. There was laundering money through the Ukraine, and they're speaking about that at the minute. They're saying that basically the war in the Ukraine is to launder money. Right. Anybody that says that doesn't understand what laundering money is, okay? What laundering money is you take money that's dirty, like that you got from selling drugs or prostitution or something that you cannot declare, but you want to use this money in a legal way. So you want it cleaned, hence laundered. So let's say I have £200,000 in my back pocket. I can't go up to a bank and say, can I just put this in? Because they want to know where I got this from. This is where laundering comes in. Laundering is making that money clean, legal, and taxable. One way to do it would be through a laundromat or any other cash business, concerts, for example, because you can just not take money from the public, but pretend that all this money came through the public, and then you can legitimately put it in a bank and use it. That's laundering. That's what laundering money is. That's what the mafia do. That's what drug dealers do. It's so that you can then use these ill-gotten gains for legal purchases like cars, houses, stock, and stuff like that. It's washing money and making it clean and taxable. That is not anything like what they're accusing the Bidens of doing or Zelensky of doing at the minute. What they're accusing them of doing is taking money that's appropriated for something and just stealing it. For a start, there is absolutely no evidence that that's happening now or happened in the past. But most gallingly, that's not laundering. That's embezzlement, you dumb fuckers. You can't even get your crimes right. And that's that's been really grinding my gears for a long time. So I just needed to get that off my chest.
I have to also say here, there's another claim done by the Russian propaganda that 90% of the arms we give to Ukraine get stolen and never actually make it to the front line.
Yeah.
And I'm just well, you're telling me that Ukraine is liberating Kherson and all these places with no help whatsoever. That makes me like them even more.
Yeah, with 10% of the weapons, isn't it? Makes it more impressive.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. I mean,
Yeah.
there's zero evidence to back up any of those claims, and that's the sort of most important thing, that they've just been spun out of whole cloth. And bizarrely, they've been repeated by quite a lot of reporters on on GB News. Why that is, I've got absolutely no idea, but for some reason they seem to go with that. So anyway, where some actual laundering was going on was Zlochevsky was actually money laundering because he's a gangster and he wanted to get his money that he's got from gangsterism and all that gangster shit into sort of some sort of like legal sense, essentially, so that I assume so that he can get out of the hood, unless Snoop Doggy Dogg's lied to me. Anyway. He was also accused of tax evasion of up to nearly $1 billion. So again, this is why he's trying to launder this money, because basically it allows him to sort of present it in a way that he can pay tax on it, and then they'll ignore this, that he hasn't paid tax on it. But anyway, so in 2016, its subsidiary, Esko Punic, was found to have violated tax law, and Burisma paid over $7 million in back tax. So we'll come back to that. Mykola Zlochevsky is the guy that basically is in charge of Burisma. He's a very dodgy character, and that is essentially why there was an investigation launched. What happened was the UK started it. The Ukraine really wasn't very good at doing it very well. And at this point, the Bidens stepped in and refused to sort of give them the money. Mykola Zlochevsky, he served as the Ecology and Natural Resources Minister during Azarov and the former pro-Russian Prime Minister for the Ukraine. There's a lot of things going on in the background of this that to do with Russia and the Ukraine, is being played out now, is because those two countries have got a long, complex history that goes on between them. And he was the National Security and Defense Counselor under President Yankovic. In 2012, Viktor Pashonka started investigating Burisma, but he wasn't deemed to be doing a very good job, and so Viktor Shokin was brought in, and Viktor Shokin was the guy that was eventually fired at the behest of Joe Biden. 2014, Zlochevsky wired $24 million to a bank in Latvia, and at this point, he fled the Ukraine because he was under investigation for all these tax evasion crimes. In 2017, the investigation into Burisma concluded, and in 2018, the year afterwards, the cheeky sod just came back to the Ukraine and wired all of his money back there because basically he was no longer under investigation. But then a case was reopened, and he was found to have illegally issued gas and oil licenses to companies that he owned. But you'll never guess what he did. He did a moonlight flit again. And as of 2019, he's believed to be in Monaco, but nobody knows. And he's suspected of theft of government funds on an especially large scale. So he's stolen a huge amount of money. But so that is essentially why there was an investigation into Burisma, because the gentleman who runs the company has got a history of being corrupt. He's a gangster, and he was laundering money through the firm, but he was also avoiding tax in an incredibly huge scale. So the idea that Burisma has a degree of corruption isn't without merit. So, perhaps the New York Post is onto something. Who knows? The next thing that we've got is Rudy Giuliani. Now, Rudy Giuliani got heavily involved in this, and has basically made his sort of his cause to expose what's on the laptop. And in May of 2022, so just this year, he was interviewed by Charlie Kirk,
Great.
Says, yes, Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA. So again, there is a theme that runs through this that we'll discuss later. Joining us is Rudy Giuliani, who has been vindicated on the entire Hunter Biden laptop, which was previously called Russian disinformation. How does it feel, Rudy? How does it feel after a year and a half? All of a sudden, the Washington Post says this is a time for reckoning. And what he's talking about is, for a long time, it was considered or doubted that the contents of this laptop were actually from Hunter Biden. There was a lot of people who suggested that there's just no proof. This could have been mocked up by anybody. The circumstances around the finding of the laptop was a bit cagey, and so they didn't really believe anything, and they were cautious to publish anything, particularly in regards to saying that it was definitely factual, except for like places like the New York Post, and it was all over Twitter, to be quite honest, and it was in the Daily Mail and various other places. But other than that, everybody was. Fox News also published content.
One thing we should just say before we move on is how many laptops are there? Because the movie claims 2. Is it just 1 in reality?
Right. We will go into this in detail. But there was originally 3, of which 1 has got the content on, but this was copied at least 3 times and has since been copied by numerous other people. So where the original laptop is, nobody knows. And the provenance of the original laptop is still somewhat shaky. However, the content appears to be from Hunter Biden. And that is what essentially happened. After a long time, basically, they were able to say, we've looked at the content and these emails do appear to have come from Hunter Biden to whoever it stated that they are. And so in that sense, they were considered real. So you might hear a lot of people saying Hunter Biden's laptop was real. And that is about this, because there's a sliding scale. Some people says, oh, come on, this has obviously just been hacked by Russia, or it's fake, or it's completely mocked up. And then there were some people that said, okay, this looks like a complete smoking gun of criminal activity. And the truth, as is always the case, lies somewhere in between. It would appear that basically the contents of the emails that were spoken about by the New York Post were real, in as much as they were genuine emails written by Hunter Biden sent to the recipients, and they can prove this. And the Washington Post had basically written articles saying that this is what had happened. And so Rudy Giuliani and Charlie Kirk are basically saying, see, for all this time you called me an agent of Russia, you said that it was all misinformation and disinformation, but there is actual evidence of serious crimes on this laptop. And but Rudy says that he's a bit sort of disconcerted by the Washington Post actually coming out in support of him, because he says, I go back to Ronald Reagan, and his rule was, we're not on track if the New York Times and the Washington Post aren't criticizing us. So the fact that they're supporting him is seen as a major, major win and a vindication of what Rudy's been saying. So Rudy explains, he says that Hunter's the fall guy. Hunter is the bad guy now. He did everything poor old Joe didn't know a thing. Poor old Joe couldn't figure out how Hunter, who was in and out of rehab 12 times, who could never hold down a job that Joe didn't get for him. But even when Joe did get him the job, he got fired from the military for cocaine. He wasn't allowed in the Ukraine because the crooked guy who hired him didn't want him buying drugs on the street. But Joe couldn't figure out how this guy became a multimillionaire. That's probably fair criticism. Like, I have to say, like, that is a pretty accurate summation of what was going on in Hunter Biden's life. He was a financial and a drug-addicted mess. He couldn't get his life together at all. And yet he kept being given opportunities again and again and again that were incredibly lucrative to the point that most people would never even dream of seeing one of these salaries, let alone the numerous salaries that he's got all at the same time, all from sort of seemingly corrupt entities. And he says, and all of a sudden, every week, half of the guy's income would show up in his bank account. So what Rudy Giuliani is saying there is that half of Hunter Biden's salary every month went directly to Joe Biden. So if true, that's shocking. And this is fraud upon fraud. The top of this conspiracy is Joe Biden. This is not the Hunter Biden case. Any prosecutor who understands their oath of office would have begun this 2.5 years ago. It's the Joe Biden conspiracy case. And now he would have to be on trial and convicted of racketeering. So what he's suggesting is basically that Hunter Biden's the gopher, essentially. This is racketeering from a criminal organization, namely the Biden family. And he goes on, he says, Hunter made $41 million in China. He made $18 million in Ukraine. He made bare minimum $3.2 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife, who was a very dedicated Putin ally. And people like Miranda Devine, who wrote The Laptop from Hell, think that they can count $100 million that Hunter got from nefarious places. So he wasn't just taking bribes, he was selling out the country to the biggest enemies of the United States. And Rudy says that Joe Biden is provably a traitor to the country. And, it's very, very shocking if true. And Rudy brings up this recent gun charge. And what happened is basically, this came out quite recently. Hunter Biden bought a gun. I think it was in 2018 when he was still addicted to crack. And he didn't declare this on the form. So this is technically a felony. You have to declare if you're an addict of any kind or there's anything that might impair you from using a gun. Some might point out that maybe a form isn't the most airtight way of wheedling those people out, and that potentially, if America was concerned with that maybe there would be other ways of finding stuff like that out. But that's another show anyway. And he says basically, like, he bought a gun, he didn't declare his addiction. You can get 5 years for that, and people do regularly. And that's not to mention the money laundering of $3.5 million of what Joe got, of which Joe got $900,000. He says that the hard drive is replete with information more about Joe than there is about Hunter. And
Okay.
yeah, I know. Charlie Kirk says, would you have done anything different with the laptop? Because what happened was, Mac Isaac gave the laptop to Rudy Giuliani's friend. Rudy Giuliani's friend gave it to Rudy, and then Rudy gave it to the New York Post. And he says, would you have done anything different with it? And he says, what, you mean, should I have given it out to everybody instead of just the 4 or 5 people who promised to handle it honestly? Now, I realise that I would have been double-crossed. Why didn't we give it to the Washington Post in the first place? Because I knew they'd write an article like this one, where they say it's all Hunter and not Joe. So he's saying that that's why he gave it to the New York Post. But the New York Times and the Washington Post, as far as they're concerned, there's nothing about Joe Biden on the laptop. But he says that there is a text in which Hunter Biden says, I gave 50% for over 30 years to Joe Biden, and none of the newspapers have published that. So again, if true, that's absolutely huge. That's like something that we really need to look at. Rooney also mentions the reference to the big guy. The thing that we said about 10 being put aside for the big guy? He searched through the hard drive and he's found 9 references to Hunter calling Joe Biden the big guy. He says that Hunter's ex-business partner, Tony Bobulinski, also claims that Hunter used the big guy to refer to Joe. And Tony Bobulinski keeps popping up and down. Like, basically, he's an ex sort of business partner of the Bidens. He was working with Hunter and James Biden, who's Hunter's uncle, in China. And Bobulinski claims that Jim Biden cheated him out of millions by embezzling, at least he's got the word right, $5 million of the $10 million that CEFC gave them. Hunter Biden stole it from me, he says. He claims that they copied a contract and claimed bank details to funnel money. And it appears that Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and the Biden family really copied the same document down to typos, the serial number, and basically what he says. This is their grand scheme to steal his share of this money. They copied the contract, and where it said Oneida Holdings, which was Tony Bobulinski's firm, they replaced it with Owasako Holdings. And then Tony Bobulinski didn't read the contract properly, signed it, and signed all this money over to the Bidens. If that's true, the man is stupid. Like he just hasn't read his contract properly. Like, whether that is true or not, we don't really know. Anyway, going on to how many copies of the laptop there are. Rudy says here, I've tried to give the FBI 3 different copies of the laptop. I have 2 different versions of the laptop. I have the complete version, and I have the version without child pornography on it. I don't like to give out the one with child pornography, but I turn it into the Delaware police and they have done nothing. And Charlie Kirk says, what? Hunter had child pornography on his laptop? To which Rudy says, yes, he did. There are at least 2 examples of child pornography. And there's also an admission to his father that has never been published in which he says, I am a danger to the children. So that's Rudy Giuliani sort of kind of admitting that he has child pornography in his possession. But that's not the thing that you're supposed to sort of take from that. You're supposed to take that Hunter Biden has apparently had it on his laptop.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing which is very difficult about how all this is. If the story is as presented by Giuliani, Giuliani's handled this laptop horribly.
Yep,
Totally.
Even if we assume that whenever we say Giuliani looked through the files on the drive, we take that to mean Giuliani hired somebody who understands something about how to forensically go through a volume to do that for him. The fact that they've done this, they've copied this, they've sent copies, blah, blah, blah. Even if it's like absolutely as they've presented it, they've handled this stuff so poorly that they've basically done all they could to ensure that there's no convictions coming from this.
No, exactly. If there's something illegal on it, then he shouldn't be holding it. He should be just giving it straight over to authorities.
But you've hit the nail on the head. This is exactly why outlets like Twitter and to a lesser degree Facebook sort of balked at the idea of people readily spreading this around. Again, the idea that this is suppressed is just nonsense, because I'm pretty sure we've all seen the photos and potentially the videos of Hunter Biden smoking crack and wearing the scarf and the sunglasses and, the one of his tattoo on his back and stuff like that, and various stuff. So this idea that it was in any way suppressed doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, to be quite honest. Now, what people are saying, like Giuliani in the New York Post, is that people are ignoring this clear smoking gun evidence. Is that the case? We'll get into that in due course. But where did the laptop come from? Now, again, this is something that is steeped a little bit in mystery because, well, we now know that we have an interview on the Will Cairn podcast. John Paul MacIsaac, the infamous Delaware repair shop man, explained exactly how this came to pass. Now, remember that the story broke in October of 2020. Does anybody know when the laptop was actually dropped off, supposedly, at John MacIsaac's Delaware shop?
Well, the movie claims there was a 90-day gap, wasn't there? So I don't know. But
the 90 days pertains to after it's been left in the shop for repair. If you don't return after 90 days, the shop claims ownership of that product, which is how he's able to share it and how he's not been done for revenge porn and stuff like that. But the actual date that it was dropped off at the Delaware shop, now, again, this is October 2020 that the New York Post came out with the story. The laptop was dropped off in April 2019.
Right.
April 2019.
It seems there's some electioneering going on here with the timing.
Well, there's some reason why they've waited over a year to sort of produce the contents of this in any sort of serious way. Now, basically, he says, I want you to begin in April 2019 on a Friday night just before closing time. And he says, it was about 10 minutes before closing. I was definitely thinking about getting out of work, not spending any time or staying late with anyone. And a car pulled up, and I let out a sigh because I realised my evening had been cut abruptly short. Any plans I had for that evening, they were gone. So the client walked in the door with 3 liquid-damaged MacBook Pros. I was able to check in one of them. One was a write-off, and the other one I left with the customer so that he could take it with him and do the recovery himself. So originally there were 3 laptops. One is left at the shop because he says that he can recover the data off of this. And he says, when I saw the Beau Biden Foundation sticker and the customer informed me that he was Hunter Biden, I instantly thought that this must have been his deceased brother's laptop and he wanted to get his memories off there. So you must remember, he saw the Beau Biden sticker and he instantly understood what was going off, that this must be Beau Biden's laptop. He reasoned that this was his brother, and so he wanted to recover his precious memories. And he says, did you recognize him? Because I've read that you are legally blind. P.O.P., hold it down. Anyway, when he walks in, at what point do you realize that it's Hunter Biden? And he says, well, when I asked his last name, when it got to Hunter, I asked the last name and he says, Biden. kind of sarcastically, as if I should have known. And then I put two and two together. The Beau Biden, I never knew what he looked like, and I never really cared. It wasn't my inclination to care about the Biden family and what they got up to. So he's got no axe to grind, absolutely nothing like that at all. But did you know about Hunter Biden's story? His troubles, his drug addictions. No, not really. I mean, you hear stories about the crazy Biden kids, but that's about it. I mean, I live in the same town as the Bidens. People I know and hang out with went to school with Hunter Biden. I know several people who've not been paid by the Biden family. And it's like, well, so do you know the Biden family or don't you? But anyway, let's not get bogged down with that. So what was the state of Hunter Biden when he came in? And he says, well, he was definitely feeling no pain. He was intoxicated. He had a bit of a mobility issue. Speech was slurred. I left 45 minutes after he did, and his vehicle was still there, so I assumed he was in the back seat, sleeping one off. And then they mentioned that Hunter Biden's password to get into his locked laptop was something a little ribald, shall we say. John MacIsaac said that he was terribly embarrassed by this. I'm just going to say it. The password was analfuck69, which, as far as I'm concerned, isn't actually a thing. But anyway, let's not get bogged down.
I like that's your takeaway.
It's wonderfully creative. No wonder he went into painting.
A 14-year-old kid would have the password on their Xbox profile or something like that.
It is a bit, isn't it? But anyway, apparently this was Hunter Biden's password. So Hunter left one laptop at the shop, and so John Paul MacIsaac, he backed up the machine, and as he was backing it up and transferring all these files across, he was opening videos, and he started to notice, as my grandfather would say, a shit ton of porn. He basically, the guy says, did you break any ethical guidelines by looking into this data? And he says, well, you know what? No, I don't think so. He wanted me to recover his data, and whether a customer requires a data recovery, it's usually for either movies or pictures, things that you can't replace. So I have to go in and look at that data and see what that data is. And he says, I saw multiple illegal acts at the same time. And let's just aside the snitching ass nature of that. Right, okay. Because, I don't know about, but if he'd have gone to my school, he'd have got the shit kicked out of him for that. But anyway, let's not get bogged down. What he saw was basically smoking crack and prostitution. Also, he says that he saw very dodgy financial documents and stuff in emails and stuff like that. What he's referring to then is that one email that says, thank you for introducing me to your father. Why he'd be interested in that untitled email, why he'd even find that email buried in all the sent documents or whatever, that is a mystery that has never been adequately explained. But anyway, he was seeing all these illegal acts, drug use and prostitution and stuff. And he says, so what do you do next? And he says, well, I do the job, His dad's not running for president. He's just a regular guy. So I just get the data. I saw a couple of financial documents that raised some questions, red flags. But that's none of my business. So 2 weeks later, his dad announced his candidacy. And that's when I started to get the fear. I've seen some very embarrassing stuff on this laptop. And I'm pretty sure that nobody is going to want this embarrassing material out there. So I got more and more concerned for my personal safety because, the Secret Service is essentially the Biden family fixer service. And what he's saying is that he's suddenly become very terrified that the Biden family are going to kill him. The Biden family who he knows nothing about and he's not really interested in politically. He's now concerned that the Secret Service are going to kill him for the contents of this laptop that was dropped off by Hunter Biden a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, he says they bailed out Hunter, whether it's pulling guns out of trash cans or waking him up when he OD'd in a hotel using his dad's credit card. And so I expected the Secret Service to come to the shop, sweep up the laptop and take it away with me. And again, I thought he had no prior knowledge of Hunter Biden, but he knows about an incident of him ODing in a hotel room, which I'm not au fait with, and an instance of him basically, what happened was when he bought that gun, the gun that was illegal, his girlfriend at the time, Haley, who is his brother's widow, she found the gun, thought probably best for a crack addict not to have a gun. So she did the sensible thing. She threw it away in a bin in a park. Yeah, she threw it away in a bin in a park, and a homeless man went through that bin and actually found the gun. Now, what happened next is a little bit of a mystery, but essentially the Secret Service apparently turned up, confiscated the gun, and made the entire problem go away. But the Secret Service actually deny this. So it seems pretty clear that they probably did, but they just don't want to publicize it. But it is interesting that these very intimate details of Hunter are known by somebody that is completely not interested in the Biden family at all. So anyway, he finished the job and he phoned Hunter, told him to buy a hard drive. And apparently Hunter Biden came back to the shop, dropped off this hard drive, and then disappeared again. And the idea was that he was supposed to, to come back and pick up the hard drive. He never did. And so at this point, John Paul MacIsaac claims ownership of the laptop. Interestingly, he'd actually started moving files and copying it onto a separate hard drive before the 90-day period had actually happened. So there's something very, very dodgy. And so what happened? He goes, well, on October the 13th, the day before the New York article comes out, he claims that Hunter Biden's attorney phoned him and said, we want our laptop back. Now, whether this happened, we don't know, because all that there is his say-so and a scrawled signature that may or may not be Hunter Biden's signature that was dropped off at the shop. The CCTV has been destroyed. There's no phone records or anything like that. There's nothing except for pretty much this guy say-so, who we must remember is legally blind. P.O.P. So it is a little bit cagey. So he goes, so what did you do? Did you speak to an attorney about it? And he says, well, in mid-July, and this is mid-July of 2019, I thought I have to get this out of my shop. Burisma was in the news, Burisma being the Ukraine thing. And I definitely saw some things that were a concern. Obscenely large amounts of money being exchanged with Burisma for favors from the State Department, basically a pay-for-play scheme. Now, that's never come out. What he's referring to is the Victor Shokin thing and Hunter Biden being paid by the firm that he worked for. But he's framing it there in a way that isn't strictly accurate. Why he's decided to do that, I don't know. But he says, I was reluctant to go to the FBI because I think Roger Stone had just been raided, so I was concerned that the FBI was weaponized. So again, this bloke that's not into politics, but is a big fan of Roger Stone and Rudy Giuliani, knows to send this laptop to Jim Jordan and has intimate knowledge about the sort of salacious details of the Biden family. He decides that he's scared of the FBI. So he's now scared of the Secret Service and the FBI, but he's waited about 6 months to do anything about it. So what he does instead is he sends his dad, who's a retired Air Force colonel, to take the laptop to the FBI in Albuquerque, so in a different state. And it's like, right, okay, why? Now, what happened, and he was very annoyed about this, was the FBI basically said to his dad, where the hell did you get this from? If I was you, I'd lawyer up because you're not supposed to have this. And he sees this as evidence that they were basically trying to cover it up. And he says that on December the 9th, 2019, the FBI finally came to his house and took the original laptop. But he's still got God knows how many copies. It's never been clear exactly how many copies that he's made. And the copy that the FBI received, they said initially that it was kind of impossible to know what was what because he'd set up two files on there, basically one which was stuff that was embarrassing and one which was stuff that he wanted saving. And he knocked all the files into these folders on the original laptop. Why he'd done this, nobody's quite sure. It seemed like an incredible amount of foresight for what he was going to find on the laptop. But anyway, basically, since then, he's had a bit of a bad time. He's lost his business. He's had to leave Delaware, basically, because he keeps getting death threats. But he claims that what was found on the laptop, and you must remember that he's not into politics, but he claims that it completely justified what Trump was impeached for. And that was why he felt the need to get in touch with Rudy Giuliani, because although Trump was being accused of blackmailing the Ukraine, actually Joe Biden had done that very, very thing. And he says, I had intimate knowledge of everything that had happened. So then in August of 2020, so this is over a year after he received it, he makes several copies and sent one to Rudy Giuliani. And the reason that he sent it to Rudy Giuliani was because he'd been following Rudy Giuliani and his explorations into the Bidens in Ukraine as early as 2019. And it's like, hang on, again, I thought you weren't interested in politics, so why would you be interested in that? So following this, Steve Bannon gets a copy, Giuliani gets a copy, and then on October the 14th, the first New York Post article is published. Now, just prior to the New York Post article coming out, Steve Bannon presents a report by an intelligence agency called Typhoon Intelligence. It's supposedly a Swedish intelligence agency, a Swiss intelligence agency that's run by a blogger called Albert Marco, who claims to be a pollster and an expert on international relations. Now, this is a 64-page report that came out, presented by Steve Bannon from Typhoon Intelligence. And in this, it details that Hunter is in bed with the Chinese Communist government. It says that Biden Sr. benefits from these deals with the Chinese government, and that Hunter was being groomed by the CCP as an asset for years, and that as a consequence of this grooming, that Joe Biden had actually changed US policy on China in order to better favor China, all due to something that they had on Hunter Biden, which is, again, nefarious. Very, very recently, another report came out. This was called the Marco Polo Report, and this came out in October of this year, and it was produced by Garrett Ziegler and a company called Marco Polo. Garrett Ziegler is a conservative senator or member of Congress, and this report is 644 pages long. Now, what Ziegler said is, after obtaining a copy of the laptop, Marco Polo investigators had undertaken what every single law enforcement institution in this country, especially and including the FBI, is not going to do: a complete release and a detailed historical record of Hunter Biden's laptop. And they found, apparently, on this laptop, 140 business-related crimes, 191 sex-related crimes, and 128 drug-related crimes. And this is the culmination of 13 months of research by half a dozen men who recognise that the Biden laptop is the Rosetta Stone of political corruption, soft corruption, and crimes. And the crimes include serving as an agent for foreign entities without disclosing it, tax fraud, falsifying business documents, prostitution, non-consensual pornography, and narcotics distribution. So again, it's starting to look pretty damn bad for Hunter Biden, and this is the sort of stuff that we're going to start to see more of, because essentially the Republicans have taken control of the House again. But what's interesting about this is that the laptop wasn't the first indication of crimes connected to the Bidens in the Ukraine. In 2020 and earlier than that, so prior to the knowledge that the laptop existed, there is a journalist called John Solomon, and he was actually very, very sort of involved in the Uranium One scandal. I don't know whether you remember that, but basically the suggestion that Hillary Clinton had profited from the sale of a uranium firm. It turned out to be nonsense, but basically this was one of the things that was used against her to try and sort of discredit her when she was going up against Trump for the election. But he wrote a story in The Hill called Joe Biden's 2020 Ukrainian Nightmare. He says that 2 years after leaving office, Joe Biden couldn't resist the temptation last year to brag to an audience of foreign policy specialists about his time as vice president that he strong-armed Ukraine into firing its top prosecutor. So again, this is the Viktor Shokin thing. In his own words, with video cameras rolling, Biden described how he threatened Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko in March 2016 that the Obama admin would pull $1 billion in US loan guarantees if he didn't immediately fire prosecutor General Viktor Shokin. And so essentially this is the story that was broken by the New York Post. John Solomon had been talking about this a lot before. And he says that Ukrainian officials tell me that there's a crucial piece of information that the Biden must have known but didn't mention, that the prosecutor he fired, Viktor Shokin, was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into the gas firm Burisma Holdings that employed Biden's younger son, Hunter, as a board member. Shokin told me in written answers to questions that before he was fired as general prosecutor, he'd made specific plans for the investigation that included interrogations and other crime investigation procedures into all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. And he says, he's actually said this in court, Viktor Shokin. He said, the truth is that I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma, a natural gas firm active in Ukraine, and Joe Biden's son Hunter was a member of the board of directors. On several occasions, President Poroshenko asked me to have a look at the criminal case against Burisma and consider the possibility of winding down the investigative actions in respect of the company, but I refused to close the investigation. So, again, just reiterating that this didn't start with the laptop. The laptop is seen as proof that these ongoing investigations were actually correct. There was actually a book that came out in 2018 written by Peter Schweitzer. Peter Schweitzer just so happens to be an editor at Breitbart. I don't know whether that might be connected in some way. But he wrote a book in 2018 that was called Secret Empires and How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family and Friends. Can you guess who this book was about?
The Bidens?
Yes, it was about the Bidens, essentially. And basically, he goes on to say, again, the same sort of thing, that Biden had prevented the money being transferred to the Ukraine unless Viktor Shokin was fired. And he also talks about private bank and various other sort of entities in the Ukraine being very, very corrupt. He says that $1 billion of the $1.8 billion aid went missing and was stolen by a gentleman called Ihor Kolominsky. And what he says is that Kolominsky actually owns Burisma. He says that he's the hidden hand behind Burisma, and that is where basically the money went to. And so he's implying an even further level of corruption that basically this is where the embezzlement apparently comes from. That $1 billion in aid apparently went missing, and the inference is that basically, seeing as Devon Archer and Hunter Biden start working there in 2014, that they probably got some of the money, and this trickled its way to Joe Biden too. So that is what's apparently on Hunter Biden's laptop. There's confirmation that he's introducing people connected to a very, very dodgy firm to his father. There's confirmation or proof that the Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin was fired at the behest of Joe Biden, blackmailing the Ukrainian government into preventing him from investigating Burisma in order to protect Hunter. There's a suggestion that he was worked for the Chinese Communist government, that he's worked with spies. There's a suggestion that Joe Biden gets a huge amount of his money. Some have said that he gets 50% of his paycheck. Some people have said that in certain deals there's evidence that he gets 10% put aside. So there's evidence of nepotism. There's evidence of corruption. And according to Rudy Giuliani and several others, there is also evidence of child pornography. According to the Marco Polo report, there's evidence of hundreds of financial crimes, hundreds of sexual crimes, and hundreds of instances of drug taking. And on top of that, Hunter Biden, it looks like he bought a gun in 2018 that he didn't declare that he was addicted to a substance. Therefore, this is a federal crime that could see him prosecuted and given up to 5 years in prison. So that is the story of Hunter Biden's laptop. Which bits of it are true and which bits of it are completely fabricated, we shall discover. So that's the conspiracy theory, so to speak. Was it exactly what you expected? Was there bits that you thought, I thought it was a bit more salacious than that? Were there bits that you thought, oh, crikey, that actually sounds like there might be something there? And do you feel that the film adequately explained it?
Well, the CP, I'm shocked.
He's never mentioned.
Yeah, I'm shocked that allegation is there, considering how small a deal they make of that, because that's not great.
No.
Like, I would let a fraudster or an embezzler in my house, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would let them in the house. I wouldn't let them near any computers, but I'd let them near the house. I wouldn't let somebody who's looking at stuff in the house.
No, exactly.
Like, fuck that.
No, that does seem to be like, well, it's a very serious allegation, isn't it? And Giuliani's very sort of free with that.
It's just thrown in like a bonus track.
Yeah.
It's really weird to me that that's not being made more of a deal of. How they've handled the volumes where we've got someone's making a copy and he's editorializing. There is so much data on a volume that's associated with an operating system, but who's signed in, when they've signed in, deleted files that might be potentially recoverable, which is a little bit different with SSDs, I know, but still, all that stuff that if the story is as they've claimed, they have handled it so bad. Even the guy, making copies of stuff on the drive itself, like all that stuff would need to be preserved in some way.
Yeah, it doesn't give there's not a strong line of evidence, because the problem is basically at the very first sort of juncture, somebody's been manipulating the data, if only to sort of like move it into files and stuff like that. But the problem is that if somebody's moved it, you don't know at what point that manipulation started. So it makes it very, very difficult. Just for the sake of clarity, all the emails concerning CEFC, all the emails concerning Burisma, the suggestion is now that they are real. They are definitely emails that were sent by Hunter Biden to those people. What is not known is there's a huge amount of data on there, so it is not known what is real or where the actual first laptop is.
So emails aren't exactly stored on laptops, are they? So my point is then, to access those emails, you've actually logged into someone's computer. You've logged into a browser on their laptop and gone through their files, like gone through that browser. It's not like he's actually looked at the files, or what?
It depends how he's doing that. So yeah, with something like Gmail, yes, you could be using a web browser and maybe he's saved a password on this browser and so on. That's possible. It's also possible that the emails are sitting on his Mac Mail or his Outlook or something like that, and there literally is a copy of them locally.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is what I imagine that these guys are suggesting has been the case, that there is a copy of the emails locally.
If you're going to recover the emails, like just say somebody's email account, okay, would you need to recover each email individually, or would you just recover Gmail, say?
Maybe.
And surely, actually, there would be no need for that, because all that Hunter would do is get a new laptop and log into his email account from somewhere else. So I'm struggling to understand. What I'm trying to envisage is how John Paul Mac Isaac found that Burisma email that sort of he thought was suspicious.
I would have thought so, and I think even if you were recovering them as a bunch of separate files, you would probably do no more than look at one, maybe two. And I'm guessing I've never done this because I've never done this. Even if you were recovering thousands of emails, there's very little reason to look at more than one or two to make sure they're okay. One plot point, which is actually, it's very important, going back to the password bit, what was it, bumfun69, whatever it was, the fact that the password is known is very important, because at least on Macs, it's so trivially easy to encrypt your drive in such a way that you're not getting in without a password. And that was one of the things I was thinking about as we were talking about this thing was, okay, if this is a Mac and he's encrypted the disk as he really should do, as everybody should do on any system, then you need the password to get in. So if he's not been given a password, he's not recovering anything.
Could somebody hack the password remotely? Could somebody find out your password on a MacBook like that? I don't know. Say, could Kim.com find out what your password is on your Mac or whatever? Or some other famous hacker?
Let's look at those two things in turn, right? Could somebody work out your password? Probably not, unless it's something simple and somebody brute forces something. Could somebody log in remotely with a password? It depends. It depends on what you've got set up. Obviously, if it's not connected to any Wi-Fi, certainly not. Is it possible to connect them back to Wi-Fi before it gets signed in? Maybe some of those weird recovery things, it's possible. But then the volume wouldn't be decrypted at that point. I think that gets murky. I don't think that that's likely. I think the most likely thing is that what's happened is that he said, I need to recover this. Okay, what's your password? My password is whatever, and he's written it down on a bit of paper. That feels true to me.
Okay, well, that would infer then that basically it is his actual physical laptop, not just the content, that he did actually go into the shop in Delaware. And, well, so either then somebody's overheard his password, somehow got hold of it, or he's given the password to John Paul MacIsaac.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't suspicious of that. But this is the thing. It's perfectly possible that somebody's got his password through some other way, got onto like his iCloud or whatever, pulled down some photographs of his dick, and got his emails, and then interspersed it with whatever crap they found.
So we just don't know.
Yeah, well, like the CP stuff especially looks really suspicious to me because there's no big deal out of that's been made, and that's so obviously wrong in a way that's not really relatable, if you like. So if I wanted to do somebody political damage, that I would probably lead with that before anything around embezzlement or whatever. Because, right, you know what? Everyone understands embezzlement, okay?
Yeah.
It's not right, it's not good, but hey, if somebody wants to make a load of money, I understand why somebody would want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is so messed up, and I'm really suspicious of that. That sounds like bullshit, frankly.
Well, yeah. We shall see, basically. So the point is, basically, there is a debate as to whether not only is the content real, but is the laptop real, and is the story about how the laptop came into the possession of various people real. And the thing is, it very much just depends on who you believe. Like, on the surface, it was definitely him because of a sticker, but I can't really identify him because I'm legally blind, and blah, blah, blah. Sounds like bullshit. But the strong sort of argument that it is true is the idea that basically, A, there's the signature, and B, you would need the password to get into it. But as you've just said, it's not impossible for someone to hack somebody's password. So it could be that basically the whole content was, though real, hacked, copied from some sort of remote sense, and then put on to this laptop at a later date. And I don't think we'll ever find out that. But what we do know is that the emails that we're speaking about, the ones about Burisma and the ones about CEFC, those specific ones are real. 10% for the big guy, they're all real. They were written by Hunter Biden. Whether the receptacle on which they were presented to the FBI, etc., is the original, no one will ever know, I don't think. But just for the sake of clarity, those are real. So, anyway, there's not a lot of trivia on this week, I'm afraid, because there's not a lot of trivia around the subject, I'm afraid. Hunter Biden's life, it's a bit tragic and horrible, really, the poor sod. Like, he's born in 1970. In 1972, his mother and his sister are killed in a car crash in which he's also involved. And he gets brain injuries, which apparently doctors have feared could have been permanent. And a few days later, so this was in late December 1972. A few days later, in January of 1973, Joe Biden is sworn into the Senate. So he becomes a senator very, very shortly after losing his wife, daughter, and having his son in critical condition in hospital, which is is a horrible turn of events, isn't it? Like,
yeah, totally.
In 1977, Joe Biden marries Jill Jacobs, and she becomes his stepmother. he goes to the Archmere Academy High School, but he's just before graduating. Hunter's busted for cocaine. So he's got cocaine special, and this is at high school. So I think he's 16, 17, something like that, already getting busted with cocaine. Now he's given 6 months probation, and then afterwards his record is completely expunged. So he's wiped clean. So probably because of who he is, he got a really, really lucky turn there, because basically, he was then able to go on to Georgetown University in 1992. And there he meets a lady called Kathleen Bueller, and she gets pregnant, and they marry the following year in 1993. In 1996, he graduates from Yale Law. So although he's seen as a bit of a sort of, fuck up, for want of a better words, he's actually a very bright bloke. He's a qualified lawyer. He is, to a degree, qualified to do some of the jobs that he's actually doing. Is he getting paid extortionate amounts? Oh, God, yes. Is he only getting those jobs because of what his last name is? Oh, absolutely. But he's not completely useless. He's not like an Ivanka Trump or a Jared Kushner or anything like that. He actually does have a set of skills that can be used. Now, as soon as he leaves university, he accepts a consultant position at MBNA. Now, this was incredibly controversial at the time, because Biden Sr. had just been completely influential in pushing legislation that was incredibly favorable to bank holding companies, specifically this one MBNA. So very early in his career, Joe Biden's doing policy things that result in his son getting a very favorable job. Now, it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have put that policy through anyway, but what it means is it does look a little bit like a you scratch my back and I'll sort your wayward drug addict son out with a really lucrative job sort of thing. So, that may be what it was. And by 1998, so 2 years after joining this firm, Hunter Biden, and this is 2 years after he's come out of university as well, he's the vice president for this banking holding company, which is not bad going, is it? Unfortunately, 2 years later, he's a completely uncontrollable alcoholic. So it doesn't go brilliantly for him at that particular firm. A year later, in 2001, he starts to work for the US Department of Commerce for the Clinton administration. Now, again, you're not telling me he's not got that job because of who his dad is. Of course he has. And he also became a lobbyist for Old Acre, Biden, and Bel Air, which is, it's a lobbying firm that he started. Lobbying firms are basically trying to get businessmen to give politicians money, and then in exchange for policies that the business would like that politician to push through. So this is the life that he's involved in. But I suspect this is the life that many of sons and daughters of rich, influential people, including politicians, are involved in. By 2003, he's had his first stint in rehab, but at least he got to go to a nice one. He got to go to Crossroads, which is the one that was set up by Eric Clapton, and apparently is rather good. So didn't really work.
I thought it was set up by Bone Thugs.
But in 2006...
I thought it was an ITV sitcom.
In 2006, him and his Uncle James is going to become very prominent in these stories, because he basically seems to be sort of tied to the hip to Hunter throughout his entire life, working for incredibly dodgy firms, pulling down massive, massive salaries. They start a hedge fund firm called Paradigm Global Advisors. Or they don't start it, they purchase it, they buy it off a bloke called James Park. James Park was married to the daughter of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Have you ever heard of the Moonies?
Yes, the Moonies.
Yeah, they're kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely, they're a cool. What people don't seem to realise is that the Reverend Sun Myung Moon was an OSS asset, and he formed the Unification Church with two Japanese fascists who were also just so happened to be OSS assets, whose names escape me at the moment, but it's his on my blog that I wrote. So the Moonies was formed about at the height of MK Ultra's experiments by three known paid assets of the CIA.
OSS?
Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor to the CIA. It was the CIA before we got founded in the early 40s, and during the war there was the precursor, which was the Office of Strategic Services. So yeah, it's very, very suspicious that such a thing had happened. And even throughout sort of like, for example, one thing that people don't know is the Moonies very much supported the Bush family, George H.W. and George W. Bush. By support, what I mean is on numerous occasions, they literally moved thousands of Mooney members to districts in which they felt that George Bush would not vote particularly solidly, and got them to register as homeowners there and then vote for George H.W. Bush. Isn't that crackers?
What?
Yeah. That's apparently got absolutely nothing to do with them being set up by members of the CIA. At the minute, they have a unification church is run by his son. They have a golden statue of Jesus who has a golden AK-47, and they're connected to a firm called K-Air Arms. And basically, yeah, that's what they're into now.
And the crown of bullets.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, it is
Yes.
quite metal looking, if I'm brutally honest, but it's also clearly insane. But yeah, that's so. Also, you see, there was a bit of trivia. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I thought the Moonies ended ages ago, but apparently
well, they
they're
did
still
because
going.
he died, but they've now broken off. Essentially, his wife became sort of like leader of one sect, and his son became leader of another sect. But his son is ultra violent. Eric Trump has endorsed them on a number of occasions, but yeah, they're basically all about God, guns, and government, like, but in a really, really sort of weird fetishized way. But
Some
yeah,
like
strange.
Far Cry 5 shit. There's a reference.
Yes, very much like Far Cry 5. Yeah, almost exactly like Far Cry 5. So
But
yes,
wasn't that Japanese prime minister who was shot recently? Wasn't he shot by somebody whose family had fallen in with the Moonies?
really. Oh, I did not know that.
I think
You may
so.
well be
I need
correct.
to look this up. I'll go to Wikipedia. The truthiest truther that ever truthed. Suspect, motive. After joining the Unification Church, his mother given around 100 million yen, which is $720,000, parcel of land, declared bankruptcy. The guy blamed the Unification Church for his family's financial problems. Researching the church's connections to Abe in the months before the attack, he believed the former prime minister spread the church's influence in Japan.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were set up originally. They're Korean, and they were set up with help from the KCIA, which is Korean Central Intelligence Agency. But the Korean Central Intelligence Agency was set up by the American Central Intelligence Agency, and as I say, the three founding members of the church were all CIA assets, like admitted CIA assets. So yeah, that's a very interesting. Yeah, Unification Church is certainly a strange rabbit hole. Now, what was interesting was that about the time, this is like 2006, so Hunters bought this firm off this guy that's connected to the Unification Church because he was a cocaine addict. Like, this is ironic. The guy, James Park, he was addicted to cocaine, so he needed money. At the time, Hunter Biden was completely sober, and so he had money, and so was able to buy the firm with his uncle. Now, there's another thing as well, like, also at this time, he was appointed to a 5-year position on the board of Amtrak Trains. Now, that might not mean a lot to anybody outside.
Biden loves trains.
Precisely. Biden has the nickname Amtrak Joe, and he's sort of credited with doing a lot to publicize the train. Basically, the backstory is that when he was working in Washington, he wanted to get home to Delaware to see his kids, and so he would take the train because he's an everyman. That's his sort of backstory. Like, whether this is true or not, who knows? But this is yet another example of Hunter getting a very, very lucrative job with a firm that has benefited directly from his father's political career. So, you know, this is a bit of a theme, really. In 2008, now this is important, he forms the consulting firm Seneca Global Advisors with Christopher Hines of the Beans family, who also happens to be John Kerry's stepson, and a gentleman called Devon Archer, who would later end up in prison on fraud charges. Now, Seneca Global Advisors LLC, this is the firm that basically received huge amounts of money from Burisma and also received the $3.2 million from the wife of the former mayor of Moscow. So Seneca Global is important, and it was formed in 2008. 2010, he's in rehab again, but by 2011, he's on the board of the United Nations World Health Programme, and he stays on that board for years, and this is why the meeting in 2015 takes place. In 2012, he manages the venture capital group Eudora Global, and from 2013 to 2020, he's on the board of BHR Partners, which is a energy firm based out of China. In 2013, he also served as a counsel for the New York law firm Boies, Schiller and Flexner. And in 2013, he decides to knock all this on the head, and he decides to join the Naval Reserve, which is essentially, sort of territorial navy, kind of, as far as my understanding goes. Like it is joining the army, essentially, or joining the armed forces. I wouldn't want to do it, so fair play to the guy. But unfortunately, he's discharged in 2014 for cocaine use. Now, he claims that he was sober at the time and that somebody must have sprinkled cocaine on one of his cigarettes. That's why he tested positive for cocaine, which I think we can all safely say is bollocks. Like, now, this is further sort of compounded by the fact that same year he decides to go to Mexico for ibogaine treatment. Does anyone know what ibogaine is?
No, is it some quack treatment for cocaine addiction? I don't know.
Well, kind of. It's a hallucinogenic that is not dissimilar from ayahuasca, but it's a lot darker in the trip. It can physically kill you, but some people say that basically it reorganizes your brain and is very, very good at just like cutting addictions straight away. And there's numerous places, it's completely illegal in most parts of the world, but there's numerous places in South America where you can go and get this ibogaine treatment. Many, many people have died taking it because it's not very good for you. It apparently just lowers your breathing, almost like sort of heroin does, to the point where you just stop breathing or can have a cardiac arrest. There's a punk band called Rich Kids on LSD, and Jason Sears, who was very heavily addicted to heroin, who was the singer, he went to try ibogaine treatment, but unfortunately died of thrombosis before he was even able to actually start the treatment. But other people have actually died from the treatment. There was Bruce Parry. Is that bloke that goes and lives with tribes and stuff? I'm sure he did on the BBC. I'm sure he did an ibogaine trial and filmed it, and it looked horrendous because it's just hours and hours and hours trapped inside your own mind, and it's not a fun experience. It's not like acid or mushrooms or anything like that. It's a bit of a trek, basically. But anyway, in 2013 he decided to do that in Mexico. It didn't work because basically he's still addicted to crack the following year, and in 2014 that's when he's joining the board of Burisma. And basically, documents on the laptop, which have been shown to be true, show that from 2013 to 2018, through all these different ventures, Hunter Biden earned over $11 million, which isn't bad going, is it?
It's not bad. I just want to observe that both Hunter Biden and Del Bigtree went to Mexico for a dodgy treatment because of crack problems.
Did he?
Yes. Whenever I say crack problems, I mean he had hemorrhoids.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. Didn't he nearly die during the surgery or something?
I think he nearly died getting there because blood was leaking from his arse.
Oh, dear.
That's a technical medical term from Sergeant Code MD.
Because there is that game called Oregon Trail where you can die of dysentery. Yeah, classic.
So at the point when his arse was falling out, that's when Del Bigtree decided to actually trust Big Pharma. That's interesting.
Well, he went and got unvaccinated blood.
Yeah.
Well, of course he did.
I didn't know the details of the arse thing. I knew the rest of it. Something I should have known, actually.
Well, I mean, I assume that's why he nearly died. He had hemorrhoids. He nearly died. These things were related. That's what happens, right? I don't know.
I've never heard of it before, but yeah, I want to believe it, so it's true. So Anyway, in 2015, unfortunately, that's when Beau Biden dies from, I think, from a brain tumor. And apparently, Hunter, they were very, very close. And he starts smoking crack every 15 minutes and drinking heavily. And also, according to documents that were found on his laptop, he signs up for Ashley Madison, which is the dating site exclusively for married people to cheat on their partners. So, what? Yeah, so not having the best time of it, apparently.
Interesting thing about Ashley. I'm sorry to interrupt. I shouldn't keep doing this, but an interesting thing about Ashley Madison was whenever they got hacked,
Yeah,
and flipping everything got leaked, everything. And one of the things that was really apparent was that almost all the women were bots.
yes,
So
it was mostly men, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was married men who were trying to cheat on their wife, talking to bots that weren't real. It's so tragic.
It's a bit like the sequel to Blade Runner in many ways.
Yeah.
Maybe I should watch Blade Runner.
He's got a robot girlfriend. That's all it is. But yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if Hunter Biden got any joy with it. But he certainly signed up for it anyway. So, and this was again shown through documents on his laptop. Right. So 2015, he's in rehab again. And this is when the email is released saying, arranging the meeting with Poroshenko of Burisma with his father. In 2016, he has yet another relapse, gets into a fist fight with his drug counselor. He then moves in with a homeless crack addict whose name is Bicycles, and they live together smoking crack for 5 months. So, an interesting period of time. That was not the strangest thing that happened during this period. In 2016, same year, he decides that he needs to get himself clean. So he decides that he's going to go to Sedona. So he decides to drive to Sedona, which I believe is in California. So it's pretty much
Arizona.
like... Oh, is it? Yep, fine. Anyway, he decides to smoke crack all the way, but he knows the direction because he's following the hallucination of a giant barn owl that he strongly believes is his guardian angel.
Can you not just use Google Maps?
Well, you don't need to when you've got a giant guardian angel barn owl. They're far more forgiving with the theft of data as well.
I'd pick barn owl every day. Yeah.
Does the barn owl know the traffic half an hour up the road?
Yeah. You know how high they fly?
Yeah, you see them. They can turn their head all the way round. They can see everything.
Exactly. Barn owl every day.
Yeah.
Fuck the satellites.
Absolutely. Totally. But he got through 3 cars on the trip. One, he crashed and after falling asleep at the wheel. Another one broke down and he returned it to the dealership absolutely full of drug paraphernalia. But he did eventually make it to rehab in Sedona. He was actually picked up from rehab by Haley Biden. Now, this isn't a coincidence. She's got the same name because she was previously married to his brother. So he started having an affair with not only this woman Bicycles, but also his brother's widow. Now, it's not necessarily as seamy as it seems. They say that basically they were always very good friends, and after... nothing happened before Beau died at all. And afterwards, they both sort of like found each other through grief. So the affair with Haley becomes public, and his wife, with whom he's already had 3 children, she divorces him. And he's broke at this point, and he's spent that entire 18 million quid.
What?
Oh, he's completely flat broke. In fact, his wife is also broke because he's stolen all her money as well. He owes $313,000 in back taxes, and his checks to the maid that cleans their house have been bouncing for the last 3 months, apparently. So
that's why in the movie that guy just wants him to leave, and he throws a load of credit cards at him.
I think so. Yeah. Again, it's sort of implying that. So he's having a bit of a bad time. So this is, and again, though, in 2017, this is when he starts working with CEFC as a consultant. And during this time, he earns nearly $5 million. Now, if you remember, this is the very famous 10% put aside for the big guy, and he got $1 million from Patrick Ho. Also, if you believed Tony Bobulinski, basically that money was supposed to go to him, but he surreptitiously changed the name on the contract in order to steal that money from him. Also, at the same time, he got a 2.8 carat diamond from Yi Jianming. Yi Jianming is that gentleman that is connected to the Chinese military that went missing, that basically owned the CEFC firm or founded it. And basically, he's the person that introduced him to Patrick Ho. Now, they do make reference to Patrick Ho in the film. He's the bloke that he refers to as China's fucking spy chief. So that is the bloke. And again, in the film, he's actually a big, fat, middle-aged guy, but for some reason, he's shown as a slim teenager in the film for some reason. But whatever. In 2018, basically, Patrick Ho was convicted of bribery and money laundering, and he gets 3 years. So it transpires that Hunter wasn't able to help him particularly anyway. In 2018, again, he relapses again, and he spends 5 months in the Chateau Marmont. Now, this is where the film happens. Now, going back to the film, can you remember in the film, this is where he talks to the dog and where he wakes up and they steal the shot from Wolf of Wall Street. Something actually I remembered that struck me, like, what the hell happened at that party? Why is everybody passed out in the one room all fully dressed? Did somebody drug the punch or something?
I thought it was strange as well. Everyone just passed out in their spot.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever been to a proper party, this guy.
It would look more like the Heaven's Gate party than any party that I've actually been to. Like,
that is classic.
But, like, yeah. Anyway, so in 2018, then he basically, so he's in the Chateau Marmont for about 5 months. He stayed there. He checked into another rehab. He lived with a sober coach. He relapsed again. He then tries ketamine therapy, which apparently is a thing. He relapses again. He has a family intervention in which he storms out and he goes to go and live in California. In 2018, this is also the year that Peter Schweizer's book comes out, which is basically the first thing connected to Breitbart that starts talking about corruption to do with the Bidens in Ukraine. In 2019, he splits with Haley and he marries a South African filmmaker called Melissa Cohen, and they have a child together named Bo, which is his 4th child. He also has another child at the same time with a stripper from Washington, D.C. called London Roberts, who he basically accidentally got pregnant having a fling. In 2019, he supposedly leaves the laptop in Delaware. And also that year, Rudy and John Solomon start their stories about the Burisma corruption and the fact that this money was withheld in order to get Viktor Shokin kicked out. OAN, America's online, that stupid fucking news network. I can't remember what they're called.
Which said the election was rigged by Venezuelan voting machines.
That's the one. That's them. That reliable
One
source.
American network, is that right?
That's them. Thank you. They go to the Ukraine, and it's them along with Rudy Giuliani that find the tape of Biden berating Poroshenko and essentially blackmailing him. But they get this tape from Andrzej Derkach, the KGB agent. So this is released in sort of late 2019. About the same time that Trump has his very famous call with Zelensky, where basically he blackmails the Ukrainian president by saying, we know you need this military hardware to fight against Russia, who had invaded Crimea and had eyes on the rest of the Ukraine. And we won't give you that equipment unless you find us dirt on the Bidens, which is completely corrupt and a completely impeachable crime. And yeah, he basically should have been properly impeached. I know he was impeached, but he should have been found guilty of that. Early 2020, the Typhoon report comes out, and that's the one that Steve Bannon was involved with, that came from the Swiss company that claimed that basically Hunter and Joe were in the pocket of the communist Chinese government. In May 2020, the tape is released to the wider public, the Derkach tape, and in September 2020, Rudy finally gets hold of the laptop and the New York Post articles come out. So you can see that basically the stuff around the Ukraine and the Bidens was sort of filtering around in the background in 2018, but for some reason didn't start to come to prominence with the public until the year that Joe Biden was going for the election. And specifically around October, which was just prior to the election primaries and such like that. So, and these just so happen to come from people like Emma Jo Morris of Breitbart, Steve Bannon of Breitbart, Rudy Giuliani, who's connected to the Trump campaign, John Solomon, who's connected to the Trump campaign, and various other people who are connected to the Trump campaign. Now, not that that should infer any sort of degree of bias about this information, but it is interesting that it all came about from these sources at this time. In 2020, just after the laptop sort of comes out, Hunter's started doing painting and getting ridiculous amounts of money for his, frankly, not very good paintings. But he completely settles his tax bills. He pays £450,000 in back taxes. And so, according to the IRS, he's pretty much cool now. A year later, in 2021, his Beautiful Things memoir comes out, and he repays a final tax debt that was owed. So he's now completely clear of all debts, according to the United States government. And then this year, the two most exciting things that have happened, or the three most exciting things that have happened, are he had the gun charge brought up, that he basically had a gun when he should have declared that he was an addict. The Marco Polo report came out saying that there were hundreds of crimes that were detailed on his laptop. And just a couple of days ago, Elon Musk decided to send details of Twitter's private emails concerning Hunter Biden's laptop and why it was not sort of like spread on the medium as much as it could be, and which particular files Twitter took off their platform at the behest of the Biden family. So that's what's happened this year. So it's still going. It's completely current, basically, this story, and people are determined to make something huge out of it.
Yeah, people are posting about it today.
Yeah, and they will do. And they say the tropes will be that there's corruption and that Hunter Biden's laptop is real. Now, let's just explain it, right? Okay? The content is real, right? Is the laptop real? No one will ever know. Nobody knows whether he gave it to John Paul MacIsaac or someone else gave it to John Paul MacIsaac. Nobody knows whether the content was hacked by somebody and then put onto a third-party laptop. All we know is that after a couple of years of scrutiny, we can finally determine that some of the emails are definitely real. And these include the ones that pertain to all the allegations made by the New York Post and the ones that form the basic crux of the conspiracy theory. So if anybody asks you, is Hunter Biden's laptop real, you can say yes with a but. But for simplicity, is Hunter Biden's laptop real? Yes. Yes, Hunter Biden's laptop is real. Does it show any particular crimes on there? Well, let's find out. So obviously the first real thing that sort of pertained to this came out in May 2020, the Derkach tape. So Andrzej Derkach, that was sort of promoted by OAN and it was promoted by Rudy Giuliani. And this was basically a very, very choppy, poor quality conversation between Joe Biden and the then president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, in which he basically reiterates what he said about Viktor Shokin, but even harsher, basically like intimating that he knows that his son's corrupt, that he knows his son's involved in corruption, and that he knows that this will all come out unless Poroshenko steps up for him and initiates a cover-up. Now, you may be asking, Neil, this sounds explosive. Why have we not been talking about this more? We've mentioned it a couple of times, but why have we not?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I'll tell you for why. Because almost immediately it turned out to be bollocks. Like, it was a very, very crude splicing together of previous recordings of Poroshenko and Joe Biden based on an actual real conversation, but with other out of context bits from other conversations crudely spliced in to give the impression that it was, valid. And it was so nonsensical that even Steve Bannon stopped talking about it pretty damn sharpish. The One American Network was really sort of pushing it, but they're a joke organization. And again, the provenance of this is it came from a bloke called Andrzej Derkach, who is connected to Rudy Giuliani, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But the long and short of it is that this guy's a KGB agent. So that particular tape was known to be a fabrication almost immediately after it came out, basically. But That's not what the New York Post was talking about. The New York Post were talking about Hunter Biden introducing his father, who was at the time the vice president, to Vadim Pozharsky. And basically he says, we've got the email. He says that, "Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving me an opportunity to meet your father and spend time together. It's reality and honor and a pleasure." And then there's the email from 2014 that says, "I'm asking for advice on how you could use your influence for the company's behalf." Now, let's just address the meeting. The meeting was a real meeting. It was in Washington, D.C. To say the New York Post actually found this out later through Miranda Devine, who did the Laptop from Hell. It was in the private garden room. It was on April the 16th, 2015. Now, what the meeting was actually set up for Joe Biden to come along and meet this Orthodox priest called Alex Karloutzos, who had recently retired from the Greek Orthodox Church, but was apparently an incredibly important figure there. And so he decided to swing by because this chap was going to be there, because he is also a representative of the UN World Health Programme, and that's what the meeting was for. So was Vadim Pozharsky there? Absolutely, he was there. So what happened? Was he introduced to the vice president? Was this an example of corruption? No, not really. It wasn't. Basically, what happened was they passed by. They sort of like he came into the room, spent 5 minutes speaking to Alex Karloutzos, who is the Orthodox priest, went over, said hello to Hunter, and Hunter said, "This is my friend Vadim. He'd very much like to say hello to you." To which Joe Biden said, "Hello, Vadim," shook his hand and walked away. Now, this has been completely confirmed by checking his diaries. People who were at the meeting said exactly the same thing. Michael Carpenter, who's Biden's foreign policy advisor, said, "I've never met with this Pozharsky guy. In fact, I'd never heard of him until the New York Post article." And various of the people who were actually at the meeting confirmed this. He says it was a meeting that was about food. Biden turned up to speak to this very venerated Greek priest, but then basically just disappeared very, very, very shortly afterwards after doing a handshake with the bloke from Burisma. Now that, in context, is why, yeah, thank you for letting me meet your father. It was an honor and a pleasure. I'd say the same thing if I was introduced to the vice president or the deputy prime minister or something by their son. But to imply that this is an indication that there was some sort of foreign influence or that he was able to get some sort of favors off of his father is complete nonsense.
That's all they show in the film as well. They literally just show him introducing him and saying hello and walking off.
And that is all that happened. Like that is literally all that happened. Now, what about the email saying, "Can you use your influence on the company's behalf?" That sounds dodgy, doesn't it?
That does sound dodgy.
Well, I mean, let's not muck about. Like, that is entirely the reason that these firms have hired Hunter Biden, because he's the vice president's son. And so he must have some sort of influence. He might be able to get us in touch with movers and shakers. Like, that is entirely why he's been given the job.
Well, it's just clout chasing, isn't it?
Of course it is. Unfortunately, he responds to Pozharsky in this chain of emails. What he will do and says is completely out of our hands, because unfortunately what happened is that Joe had this basically say-so with his son that you could do this if you want, but I'm not getting involved with anything. I hope you know what you're doing, was the exact quote that Joe Biden said to his son, but I'm not getting involved in anything. Now, do all these people who are hiring him think that they're going to get access to Joe Biden? Of course.
Probably, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And does Hunter and his Uncle James intimate very strongly that, yes, they will get access to Joe Biden? Yes, of course they do. That's why they're paid millions and millions of dollars. Do they ever? Well, I mean, if this meeting is anything to go off, no, not really. There's really very little to show anything at all. Now, it goes on to Mac Isaac and basically talking about, how he made the copy of the hard drive. Now, what it doesn't tell you is the bizarre nature of the fact that he kept hold of this hard drive for over a year before he decided that it was worth turning over to the FBI, or 6 months before the FBI, a year before it was worthy turning over to Jim Jordan, Rudy Giuliani, and various other people connected to the Trump administration. What they also don't mention is that for some reason, John Paul Mac Isaac started copying the data before the 90 days was up. So he was illegally stealing the data, and he has admitted to this. Why is a bit of a mystery. How he would have found that particular incriminating email in a huge cache of emails has never been explained.
Can we just be really, really clear here? This is copying the stuff not to the hard drive that Hunter supplied, but to some other systems elsewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the point. By the time the FBI have got it, there's been at least 3 or 4 copies made of it. One which is to go to Rudy Giuliani in the case of his death by the Secret Service. So, again, the evidence trail is, shall we say, shonky at best.
I find this to be a bit strange as well, because like he says that he came across different files in there and he saw things that are illegal. But when I copy stuff from my computer to an external hard drive, like I'm not seeing thumbnails or anything of the content. I'm just seeing names of the files.
Yeah, and that never made sense to me as well, because if you're copying films over, you don't necessarily have to look at the films. You just assume that I'll copy everything from the hard drive across, because you don't know. Like, hello, this one of you with the 2 black girls, do you want to keep that? Like that conversation never happened, right? Okay, like so how's he knowing which ones to go? Why is he watching these films as he's downloading them?
Yeah, especially if you're working, professionally with. I take stuff off machines that are wrecked or whatever. Like, presumably, you're going to have some utility that you're not even going to. It's not like you're going to open up Mac Finder or Windows Explorer and Control A, Control C, Control V. Surely, if you're doing that often, you've got some other utility that automatically pulls down everything it can and bucks it somewhere else, and you're not even looking at the individual files or the directories. Maybe. Somebody can fact check me on that and find me wrong, but I would be astonished if somebody who does that for a living is relying on manually going through files like some oaf.
Yeah, quite. But again, somehow he managed to find something that was so worrying that he made several copies, including one to be sent to Rudy Giuliani in the event of his death. So, yeah, ridiculous. It goes on. So less than 8 months after Pozharskyi thanked Hunter Biden for his introduction to his dad, the then vice president pressured the Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko and Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk into getting rid of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin by threatening to withhold $1 billion US loans in December 2015. Shokin, at the time of his firing in March 2016, had made specific plans to investigate Burisma that included interrogations and other crime investigations to all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. Now, this is the crux of the claims, that basically he was investigating corruption of the firm, corruption that involved Hunter Biden, and that it was insisted by Joe Biden that he was got rid of because he was investigating this. Now, if that was true, that would be shocking. Unfortunately, not a bit of it is true. Well, what is true is that Joe Biden did say that we want him removed from the investigation, and we are not giving you $1 billion unless you get rid of him. That is true. That is 100% true. Okay,
right.
But you know why? Because Viktor Shokin was stalling his investigation into Burisma. What Viktor Shokin had actually done was he'd not done any investigation into Burisma at all. He'd got in touch with Zlotevsky and said, if you pay me a serious amount of money, I won't find anything. And so it was for that reason that the IMF, the World Bank, the UK government, the Ukrainian government to a degree, and the American government, along with, I believe, people from Europe as well, all said you need to get rid of Viktor Shokin. Okay, because he's not investigating, not because he is investigating, because he's not investigating. So you know what happened once they actually got rid of Viktor Shokin?
It started getting investigated.
Yes. And Burisma was eventually fined $7 million in back tax that it owed. So if the intent was to stop the investigation, the exact opposite happened. There's more to it, though. Do you know when the period of investigation was, when Burisma was being investigated by Viktor Shokin?
No.
2012 to late 2013.
Oh.
So before Hunter Biden actually worked for the company.
That's very damning, yeah.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? So basically what they've tried to say is that the meeting in 2015 was an indication that basically they were going to then get into cahoots and launder or embezzle money in order to stop an investigation into Hunter Biden. And the opposite was true. Joe Biden's actions actually ensured that the investigation went ahead, but it was nothing to do with Hunter Biden at any time anyway.
I found this really curious around, they show footage during the credits of Biden boasting publicly about this, right? And there's two things that I thought was strange about that. One was he's the vice president, so constitutionally, his position is he sits in a house somewhere and waits for the president to die.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Oh, and he breaks ties in the Senate. And the other thing is, if you're doing a corruption, you don't stand, you don't go to some public forum and say, and then I've done a corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's, I don't, look, I've never done a corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. So maybe I'm missing some of the finer details, but one of the core elements of a successful piece of corruption is not leaving evidence lying about everywhere, like you boasting about it.
It's also important to remember that he said that at the Council for Foreign Relations, so Millennium 2000 vibes.
Oh, there you go.
And also, another weird thing is they say, like in the movie, they call it Council of International Affairs or something like that. But when they show the clip at the end, it says Council on Foreign Relations. So
I did that. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. It's like with the Gigio Google thing. Like they include it and then they don't. Why?
That Gigio Google thing was probably the sloppiest thing that happened in the whole film.
But basically, so the long and short of it is, there's this meeting that he arranged with Vadim Poroshenko. It's literally just a handshake, and the threat for Biden to withhold the money, A, wasn't solely from Biden, B, actually started the investigation rather than stopped it, and C, was nothing to do with Hunter Biden anyway. So like already we're off to a fair old start. Where did this story come from? Well, this story came from Emma Jo Morris, who had never written an article before in her entire life, but decided that basically she'd do a story in the New York Post about Hunter Biden. Now, she actually put a lady called Gabrielle Fongage. She credited her with a byline also on the article. Most people think to give it credibility, and the woman, this Gabrielle woman, basically said, "I had nothing to do with the article at all. I didn't even know about it until I saw my name on it when it was on the internet." So yeah, but again. They've been and checked the details of that meeting. They've been and checked the emails of everybody involved in that meeting, and there's nothing involving Poroshenko except for the fact that he was going to be there as a guest of Hunter, and basically numerous witnesses have said, yeah, he shook hands with him and he wandered off, and that was literally what happened. It's a big something and nothing. Now, the second big sort of revelation from the New York Post is that he pursued lucrative deals involving China's largest private energy company, including one that he said would be interesting for my family. And so basically, this is CEFC, where he's getting offered £850,000 a year, but then he's also given a huge sort of amount of money. And if you remember, the big sort of smoking gun was that, in addition, the email outlined a provisional agreement under which 80% of the equity of the company would be split among four people, H being Hunter, who got 20%. The email said 10% is also held by H for the big guy, and 10%. Does that refer to Joe Biden? Yes, absolutely. Yes, 100% it refers to Joe Biden. And Hunter was saying that basically 10% of the equity of this company he would hold and he would give to his dad. So that's fairly damning as far as we can see, unless, of course, there was some sort of other information that meant that this wasn't as damning as it might seem. For example, if there was another email that came back, like directly in that email chain, that Hunter Biden forwarded to the rest of the CAFC that said, spoken to the chairman, and he gave an emphatic no. What has happened is...
to the big man.
Yeah, basically, he's spoken to Joe Biden and he said, no, Hunter, I don't want anything to do with any of your lobbying stuff. I told you before, I want nothing to do with it.
Overall, it sounds like Hunter's, there's some stuff that certainly looks like attempts at corruption, but his dad sounds like a stand-up bloke in all this so far.
Well, it gets better than that, Stars, right? Because basically, let's examine the people that he's working with, that Yi Jianming. Is he a Chinese spy? I'd put my house on it that he's a Chinese spy. Okay, and Patrick Ho, is he a Chinese spy? Oh, yeah, he's very much a Chinese spy. So that element of the film, where basically they're saying you were dealing with people who are connected to the Chinese government because it's China, everybody's connected to the Chinese government, there's an element of truth to that. But, and here is, now this I think is the most important part, right? You know those deals with the CEFC, the companies that they were going to start up with, so 20% of equity, 850,000 going to him, blah, 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 10% for the big guy. That was, those firms, they never, ever started.
Wow.
It never got past the business proposals phase. So there was never 10% to give to the big guy. And even prior to that, the big guy had politely refused any involvement with it. So even if you were to say, yeah, but of course he'd say that in the email, there was no 10% to even have. Now, did he get a huge amount of money from Yi Jianming for consultation purposes? Yes. Did a lot of that go to his Uncle James? Yes. Did any of it actually start anything? No, nothing at all. Nothing.
So they ripped off some Chinese spies.
Well, they seem to have ripped off that Tony Bobulinski fellow by basically stealing his share of it. And the Chinese government, via these spies, seem to have paid them a huge amount of money for sort of consultation fees for a business that never gets off the ground. So, yeah, they've come out of it smelling of roses, to be quite honest.
I mean, if the Chinese government, which I hate,
yes,
for many reasons, wants to give me money for doing piss all, I'll take it. I mean, I know that's not necessarily their intention, but awesome.
No, it is. That's entirely what their intention was. They're trying to pay Hunter Biden and James Biden an astonishingly large amount of money in order to get close to the vice president and possibly the president, and to try and sow influence. That's entirely why they've done it. But it didn't work. It didn't work. It just didn't work. Now, was Hunter aware of this? I think probably. But was he ever going to actually give them anything? I don't think he can. I think it's all flatter. I think he just he trades on his name. He absolutely trades on his name. Now, the next explanation of this was from Miranda Devine. Miranda Devine is the author of The Laptop from Hell. And if you remember, she expanded on that business meal. She says that this really dodgy bloke, Vadim Berezhsky, was brought to the meeting. Now, we already know that the meeting itself was something and nothing. It was literally a walk past and a handshake, and nothing came of it. And there's literally nothing sinister about it at all. Who's Miranda Devine? Well, she's an Australian columnist. She's based in New York, and she writes for the New York Post. She's also worked at the Boston Herald, the Telegraph, the Sun, and the Sunday Times. She's most well known for promoting the white genocide theory.
Good.
Yeah, the idea that basically black people or people of colour will move into a predominantly white neighbourhood, they will marry and breed, and this will eventually sort of push out the white people, and this is termed white genocide. 2 points. One, that's not a replacement then, is it? If their white people are still there, that's not a replacement. And two, there's no genocide in there. If you want to see a better example of white privilege, we don't even get genocided in our own genocide. That's white privilege on fucking steroids, that is.
For further information about this white genocide conspiracy theory, listen to our cultural Marxism episode.
Absolutely.
Nice.
We go over that and what also sort of twaddle it is, essentially. She's also a climate change denier, and she also ran with the theory that, remember when Australia was on fire, all those bushfires?
Yeah.
She claimed that it was started by conservationists in order to make the right wing look bad.
So hold on a second. She says that forest fires were a false flag, not a false flag, but
yeah, no, the false flag. She's not the only person that said that. Max Egan was really going for that one as well. Like,
Not him.
yeah, quite. Like, she also claims that same-sex marriage is a political tool to undermine the last bastion of bourgeois morality, which is the traditional nuclear family. And she also says that women abusing the welfare state is the main cause of domestic violence. So I think it's safe to say that this woman is absolutely batshit crazy. She also strongly believes that the last election was stolen. And she also, can you remember that poor lad, Quaden Bales, the lad that had dwarfism, and he made the video saying that he was being bullied, and then a load of unpleasant right-wing people jumped on and said that he was actually an adult in disguise looking for sympathy. And it turned out that that wasn't true, that he was actually a poor child that was being bullied with dwarfism, and that everybody said that was, what's the word, cunts. Well, she was the person that started it. She was the very person that started that, and she had to issue an apology to Quaden and his mother. And I believe she was sued for it as well. So that's good, at least. But anyway, so her story, again, I hate to sort of damn people with, like, by association or whatever, but it gives you a strong indication of where this sort of stuff is coming from. We've got Steve Bannon. We've got people very much connected to the right wing. We've got promoters of white genocide and all that very sort of fringe stuff. Essentially, she basically says the same sort of stuff. One of the things that she does say, she says that at the time, Burisma was paying Hunter Biden $83,333 a month. Now, she actually got that from John Solomon, who we'll speak about in just a second, but that's not true. That was actually Devon Archer's pay. If you remember that Devon Archer and Hunter Biden had that firm called Rosemont Seneca, well, basically, just prior to forming to joining Burisma, Hunter sold his share of it to Devon Archer. So Devon Archer used Rosemont Seneca as basically almost like his PayPal. Send it to them and then I'll get it. And so John Solomon found a series of payments to Rosemont Seneca of £83,333 a month and wrongly assumed that this was Hunter Biden's pay. But the problem is that by that time, Hunter Biden had left Rosemont Seneca. So the money was actually not going to him. It was going to Devon Archer. And Miranda Devine actually repeats this. And again, she talks about the meeting, but the meeting was to meet Greek Orthodox church figure Alex Karloutos. So remember basically the email where it says, Dad will be there, but keep it between us now. And the response was, okay, so the reason for the dinner is ostensibly to discuss food security. They tried to frame that in the article as like, that's the reason that we're going to pretend that we're there, but we're actually there to meet Vadim. But it's actually nothing to do with it because the person is Alex Karloutis' son that they're emailing. So what that email exchange actually is Hunter doing a really nice thing for an old Greek priest, and he's saying to his son, yes mate, I've arranged it for my dad to so here's the strange thing. He did actually arrange for his dad to meet somebody at that meeting, but it wasn't the Ukrainian, it was the bloke from the Greek Orthodox Church. And why did he do that? Because the bloke from the Greek Orthodox Church would have been absolutely thrilled to meet the vice president, and he thought that it was a nice thing, and so he arranged it with his dad and with Alex Karloutis' son. That's what happened.
Crazy. Wow.
Ridiculous, isn't it? But that's the thing that's being completely framed. Now, another thing that they don't tell you, okay, is that Burisma, when all this came out in 2020, what do you think the GOP did about it? Because, this sounds very salacious, and you know what the GOP are like. They're very keen to sort of like sling mud. I mean, basically, it would be a response to the Trump impeachment and, latterly the January 6th and stuff like that. So what do you think the GOP actually did in regards as response to the New York Post articles?
They shared the hell out of it.
No, they
No?
they did, but they actually did their own investigation.
Oh.
So the GOP in as early as September 2020 started investigating connections to Burisma and Hunter Biden. This was prior to the laptop, but basically, as the investigation was ongoing, these emails became apparent. Do you know what the GOP found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing illegal in the relationship between Hunter Biden and anyone in China or Burisma. They said that it on the surface seemed problematic because essentially you've got someone connected to a potential president or vice president with corrupt companies, but that there was nothing illegal and that it altered no foreign or domestic policy. And so this is why it sort of slightly amuses me, because Rudy Giuliani's investigated it. Miranda Devine's investigated it. The New York Post has investigated it. The FBI has investigated it. The GOP has investigated it. Typhon Intelligence has investigated it. Steve Bannon's investigated it. Marco Polo's investigated it. The GOP's investigated it. All of these people have investigated Hunter Biden's laptop over the last 2 years. And the worst thing that they found was this meeting with Vadim Poroshenko, which is nothing. That is all they've found. They've been doing this for 2 years now. For 2 years. And they've never found anything. Going on to Rudy Giuliani.
Oh, here's my favorite. Before we get into Rudy Giuliani, right? I got a question for you, Neil, and for you, Ivor, because you remember as well. Isn't it a bit strange that Giuliani has become like forefront of this kind of conspiracism when 9/11 trutherism, he was the big bad guy?
Yeah. In fact, there's a song by Star Fucking Hipsters that basically references the 9/11. It's called 9/11 was an inside joke, and it says Giuliani made the play, made the evidence go away.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
He was the big cover-up guy. He was the guy who helped the whole thing happen. Like,
completely.
What's going on here?
I've also heard that he's connected to the mafia as well. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think familiarly he's connected to the mafia. And interestingly, there's been two basically major investigations into the mafia in American history. One that was run by Robert Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy was up to his tits in the mafia, and one that was run by Rudy Giuliani. And if rumours are to be believed, Rudy Giuliani's up to his tits in the mafia, which I just find slightly amusing. But whether that is true, I don't know. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Rudy Giuliani, why people take him seriously at all? I mean, the guy's just... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Like, he's a grotesque. He's just he's a bizarre, strange person. Having said that, like, I think without Rudy Giuliani, we wouldn't have had the press conference outside the sex toys.
Yeah, he's been very entertaining recently, but it's just weird, like this pivot.
Yeah,
and the truth movement just doesn't see it.
No, but there may be a reason for that.
There is that whole thing, Robert Kennedy, whether he murdered Marilyn Monroe. That's I've watched a documentary about that. But I don't know if it's true. Yeah, that's another sort of CT to throw into the mix.
Well, I don't think it was. I don't think it was him himself, but the inference is that basically she was going to spill the beans on a lot of people, and the mafia did it via barbiturate enema. Is what I've heard. Apparently, as well, John Kennedy was terrifically... He was drugged to his fucking gills. Like, he was being given meth and opioids, and he had a really bad back and, like, loads and loads of problems. And apparently he was massively, massively indiscreet. Now, what's interesting is the Camelot crowd, which is like, his brother-in-law and the Sinatra and all of that lot, they were doing shed loads of cocaine. Some of it that was coming from Jay Sebring, some of it that was actually coming from Charles Manson, of all people. But that's for another time. But he was very anti-drugs, but was taking all these prescription pills that were given to him by the very famous Dr. Feelgood. Now, apparently, like, when he was very, very sort of like high on these things, he'd get ridiculously indiscreet, and he told Marilyn Monroe about Roswell, and he told her about all sorts of other, like, apparently this is the story, like really, really things that he shouldn't have told her, and that apparently sort of was part of the reason that she was deemed needed to be got rid of. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. We'll have to find out for a future episode, basically.
I mean, it sounds like bollocks, but I know that I have definitely said things that I shouldn't have said whenever I've been,
Intoxicated.
well, not so much intoxicated, but interested, shall we say? Keen.
I do stuff when I'm drunk. My friend has got this fabulous expression for it. He said to me once, he said, Neil, does drunk Neil ever buy sober Neil things that he thinks that he might like, and you don't remember that you've bought them until they turn up? And then sober Neil's delighted, but can't remember when drunk Neil actually bought it. I was like, yeah, that does happen more often than I'd like to admit, if I'm brutally honest. But I just thought that was a lovely way of phrasing that. Like, sober Neil would fucking love this. And who's to say he doesn't need another bit of memorabilia about black metal? Like, so yes, exactly. But anywho, so Rudy Giuliani. So he's chatting away to Charlie Kirk, and basically what they're saying is that they feel vindicated because basically, although they were told that the article, they've been told for 2 years that Hunter Biden's laptop is fake. The Washington Post has now come out and absolutely vindicated everything that they've said, and by inference, all the stories of corruption, etc., etc., etc. Did the Washington Post? No, they didn't at all. Like, the story is here. It's called "The Hunter Biden Story is an Opportunity for a Reckoning," and basically, what it says is what everybody knew already. We'll link it to the thing. I won't read the whole thing out because we're banging on now. But it basically says that, yeah, we didn't share this because we didn't know about the provenance of it. It looked like it had been hacked. A lot of it is revenge porn. Hunter Biden at the time was a private citizen. We couldn't, in good conscience, share this story as a fact because we didn't know if it was factually accurate. However, we have since found out that at least parts of it are factually accurate, but don't actually show any illegality, any corruption, or anything that is actually newsworthy. So with Giuliani and Kirk trying to spin it as basically they've been vindicated, it's a lie. It's a complete lie. They haven't been vindicated at all. What the Washington Post has said is, you know what, maybe perhaps we shouldn't have been so standoffish in looking at the contents of it because a lot of it has turned out to be true anyway. But I'll repeat, I knew everything that was on that laptop by this time because it had been on Twitter and it had been on Facebook and it had been in the Daily Mail and it had been on Fox News and it had been all over InfoWars and everywhere else. And Rudy Giuliani had been banging on about it for ages. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, the bit that Giuliani says about basically, like, why didn't Joe figure out this guy who can't hold his shit together was a multimillionaire? Did he not think that there might be an element of corruption or nepotism going on? That is perfectly fair criticism from Rudy Giuliani. That is absolutely true. And it shouldn't happen. And there's more. He got like 200 million from Saudi Arabia. Oh, no, wait, sorry, no. That was Jared Kushner, wasn't it? Oh, I am sorry. I got that completely wrong. So this is bullshit. Like, if you look at what the benefits that Ivana Trump got for her clothing line and the jobs that she was allowed to do and that the two idiot boy kids were able to do, they're not qualified to do any of these jobs. They're not qualified to put on a fucking pair of trousers the right way around, right? And yet they're all particularly wealthy. Like, if nepotism and getting paid huge amounts of money for jobs that you probably aren't qualified to do that involve very little work, if that is considered corruption, then yes, we are seeing corruption here. But we're not seeing anything illegal, and we're not seeing anything like the Republican Party is trying, and Rudy Giuliani and Bannon and people that are trying to frame it. And when he says stuff like all of a sudden every week half of the guy's income would show up in his bank account, that's just bollocks. He's just completely made that up. What that comes from is something that we'll come to in a little bit. Basically, there was an email exchange on there between between Hunter and one of his daughters. And basically in it, he says that, don't worry, I won't take half your salary like somebody that we could mention, or some words to that effect. And what it does is it pertains to a time back in 2010 where Joe Biden had lent a load of money to Hunter. Hunter had pissed it up the wall. And so he says, well, I want this money back. But rather than pay it directly to me, pay for some repairs that are being done on the house. And so it's just Hunter Biden complaining, saying, I won't take half your money like Dad did that one time. So that's what that's pertaining to. When he says stuff like, he made $41 million in China. He made 18 million in the Ukraine. He made £3.2 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. All of that is complete bollocks. The only one that's got even an element of truth is the 3.2 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. That did go to Rosemont Seneca. But if you remember what I said before, Rosemont Seneca was nothing to do with Hunter Biden. He sold it to Devon Archer. What Devon Archer did was he sold a New York apartment building to the wife of Moscow's mayor. He sold it to her for $3.2 million. So yes, it went through Rosemont Seneca, but it's absolutely nothing to do with Hunter Biden, and it's a perfectly legitimate purchase of an apartment. So again, all of these things that are being sort of framed as sinister, A, aren't sinister, and B, have got absolutely nothing to do with Hunter Biden. So there's a text in which Hunter Biden says, I gave 50% for 30 years to Joe Biden. They never published that. This is what he's referring to. And A, that was published. It was in The Sun, and it was on Fox News, and it was in various places. You know how I know? Because I found it before I'd watched this interview with Rudy Giuliani. And it's to his daughter Naomi, and it says, I hope that you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. He says, don't worry, I'll get the blame. It's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. And again, what this pertains to is a time when Hunter Biden had $2,000 in the bank. $2,000, that was all he had to his name. And he owed about $20K to his dad. And this was in 2010. And so he arranged for him to pay for the repairs on his dad's bank. So when he's saying, I hope what you did, I pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. Don't worry, I won't make you pay half. I always get the blame. What he's saying there, if you look at the context of the email, is, oh, woe is me, I'm the black sheep of the family. Naomi's fucked up in some sense. And he's saying, don't worry, I won't hang this over your head like everybody does with me. Oh, God, can't I get a break? Why am I the black sheep of the family? Blah, blah, blah. And the reason that you're the black sheep of the family is because you keep fucking spending all your money on drugs. Like, it's very, very straightforward. I mean, this is all very clear in the actual laptop emails as well. There's that beautiful email from Joe Biden to his son that basically says, I love you, kiddo, but you're going to have to get your shit together. We can't carry on doing this, but always know I've got your back. And that was, if you remember, that came out recently. Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to present that as some sort of indication that they were horrible people, and it backfired quite spectacularly. Now, Tony Bobulinski, he basically is also being promoted by Rudy Giuliani. He says that they stole $5 million from him by basically changing the details of the contract. Now, Tony Bobulinski has taken this story to several people. He's took it to the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal reviewed his evidence and said that there is no publishing of corporate records reviewed by the Wall Street Journal that show any role for Joe Biden. So he tried with the Wall Street Journal, and they basically said, there's nothing here, Tony. You've just made this up. There's no criminal activity, and there's certainly nothing that pertains to Joe Biden. Did Hunter rip you off? Don't know. We'll never know. But if he did it in that way, you're a moron. So he went to Fox News as well. And you know what Fox News did? They went through his emails and the contracts, and they said that they don't show any evidence at all that the elder Biden had any dealings with Sinahawk Holdings or took any payments from them or any Chinese firm. So Tony Bobulinski has already sent this two news channels, and he's also gone to the authorities as well, and they've all basically told him to sod off. So when people start bringing Tony Bobulinski up over the next few weeks, you know that it's nothing. There's absolutely nothing there. The final thing that Rudy Giuliani basically says is that there's child porn found As far as I could tell, that's fabricated. That's completely made up. And I'll tell you why I suspect that I know it to be true. Because as I said, there's already been investigations by the FBI, the GOP, Marco Polo, Typhon, Rudy Giuliani, the New York Post, Miranda Devine, Steve Bannon, and various other people. They've all and Marco Polo. They've already looked at the laptop in great detail, and the only things that they can keep bringing up are these tired old pieces of shit. As you quite rightly said, if there was child pornography on there, wouldn't that be the first and only thing that they would be focusing on? Well, the answer is yes. Of course, that is what they'd be focusing on, and the logical inference from that is that basically it's bollocks. It's absolute bollocks. There's no child pornography on there. John Paul MacIsaac never said that he found child pornography on there. And he was so diligent that he found an email pertaining to a Ukrainian gas firm that he had no knowledge about, because he has absolutely no knowledge about the Biden family or politics. So, again, we can pretty much skip over him. John Paul MacIsaac, in his interview, he gives very, very different reasons how he got the laptop, why he was scared of the laptop. Initially, he's scared of the Secret Service, then he's scared of the FBI, and he's scared of the fact that Trump's getting a bad rap for his quid pro quo, when actually the Bidens are the ones doing the quid pro quo. And there's just nothing of the sort in any of the actual data that he produces. And I don't believe it. I don't believe that he had no prior knowledge of Hunter Biden. Like, again, he speaks about stuff that was very specifically reported by John Solomon and John Solomon alone, which was the concerns about Burisma. And for him to have intimate knowledge of that means that he's involved intimately in sort of red pill type politics, because otherwise there's no reason for him to know. So I don't believe him. I never trusted. It's dodgy as hell. Where'd you get the laptop from? From this blind bloke who couldn't actually identify it. But trust us, there's a load of fucking dodgy shit all over there. And what have the FBI said? Well, the FBI have said that, how did you get hold of this? Why did you keep this for 6 months before approaching us? Why did you then make numerous copies of it and send them to people like Rudy Giuliani? Like, none of it makes any sense unless basically it strikes me as a plan. I think the whole thing's been planted. Is the content real? Yes, the content's real. Is there anything on there that's actually incriminating in any way? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the coordinated way, in, like, just as the New York Post is coming out and everyone else is coming out, this Typhoon intelligence report came out via Steve Bannon. Now, I didn't talk about this very much because it's a 64-page report. The long and short of it is it says that he was basically in bed with the communist Chinese government, and that Hunter was an asset, and that Joe Biden received money directly from the Chinese government in order to change American foreign policy. And this came from a bloke called Albert Marco, who apparently is a pollster and international relations buff and a US congressional expert. He's not. It transpires he's not. He's a failed businessman who seems to be friends with Steve Bannon from Florida. And the Swiss security firm, Typhoon Intelligence, hasn't, and has never existed. And the face of the agent that was purported to have compiled the dossier was created by artificial intelligence. And it transpires that absolutely nothing in the report that came from Steve Bannon was true. Absolutely everything was fabricated. It's just complete bullshit. And I think that the reason that he pushed this was because just prior to this, the GOP report came out in which they said that they found absolutely nothing illegal going on. So, yeah, it's not great, is it, to be quite honest? So, again, it's starting to look very, very dodgy.
The thing is, right, the whole thing, whenever you look at how they've presented this stuff, it all sounds super incriminating, but unpacking why it is a nothing burger is super complicated, super involved, very difficult to do. And I mean, you've got these guys, and they're just throwing bullshit at the wall over and over and over again. Yeah, and you've got the thing about it is the cleaning up misinformation is an order of magnitude more difficult than generating it.
That's called the bullshit asymmetry principle. Yeah,
you always amplify the bullshit, again, you in many ways have to amplify it in order for people to have an understanding of it, so that you can then debunk it. It's the classic sort of. I mean, they know what tactics they're using. It's the whole get someone to deny something in the newspapers. When did you stop hitting your wife? Because then basically the accusation is then repeated, and most people just come away with the accusation. And so this is why. We'll come on to the Twitter thing, for example. Elon Musk very recently, basically, he's given it to a journalist called Matt Taibbi, all the interactions between. They're basically saying, and people have jumped on it, including Elon Musk and Twitter, and said, the actual tweet they put out was, if this isn't evidence of withholding the First Amendment, I don't know what is. And it turns out that is an incredibly accurate tweet, because he doesn't know what is. That isn't withholding the First Amendment at all. What happened was, it transpired that there is a mechanism within Twitter that both political parties have used, where basically they can approach Twitter and say, that's not true, can you take it down? And what he exposed was Twitter staff basically saying, we don't know where this has come from, we don't know if this has been hacked, we don't know whether this is accurate, we can't allow this to spread on our platform, which is exactly the same thing that Facebook said, and it's exactly the same thing that the majority of the media said, because basically they can't prove that it's real, and so they don't want to be party to spreading mis or disinformation. And then his big revelation that 5 files were taken off of Twitter. They were all naked photos of Hunter. So they were revenge porn. So Elon Musk has presented this as, wow, and a lot of people have bought it. They've gone, look, this is clear election meddling. And it's like, he wasn't even vice president at the time when this happened. He was a private citizen at the time that this happened. That's not election meddling. And Hunter Biden was certainly nothing to do with it. So no, it's not suppressing information. It's not denying First Amendment rights. It's not partisan. And it's perfectly reasonable to do it in such a way, basically. But as you say, people don't tend to look at that as well. There's another perfect example, the Marco Polo report that came out this year. There was a big hoo-ha made about that, and then nothing happened. And they found 140 business-related crimes, 191 sex-related crimes, and 128 drug-related crimes. And you know how I know that, again, this is bollocks? Because the GOP's had this for over a month. They've looked at it and gone, no, there's nothing there. Now, I actually read the entire report. So let's have a look at this. 140 business-related crimes. Is there 140 business-related crimes in there? No, there's not. What there is there's 140 examples of what's called a SAR, a suspicious activity report, right? Now, a suspicious activity report is raised on any transaction that is above, I believe, $8,000. Now, bearing in mind that his monthly wage was in the region of $80,000, a lot of transactions to Hunter Biden will be raised as suspicious activities. These have all been examined by the IRS, and the IRS has determined that absolutely none of them are suspicious. Furthermore, upon reading the Marco Polo report, I read through a few of these suspicious activity reports. The very first one in the Marco Polo report refers to Rosemont Seneca in 2015, at a time when Hunter Biden didn't work for them anymore. So the very first suspicious activity report in this report is about a firm that isn't suspicious or illegal, and Hunter Biden didn't work for them at the time that the report was made. So, and again, just to give an idea of the person that's raised this bullshit, right? Okay, Garrett Ziegler, another pusher of the big lie. Also, basically, he was involved in the January 6th debacle, and he's described the January 6th committee as being made up of a bunch of anti-white Bolsheviks.
Oh, okay.
So,
He also said that any... Yeah, quite. You know,
a dog whistle for the Jews, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And what he's saying as well is that any female that speaks out against Trump, they're only doing that because, in his words, they are hoes and thots. But so he might come across as a bit of a git, this bloke, right? Okay, but you like. he reassures us that he is the least racist person ever. So, I'm convinced by him.
I thought that was Donald Trump.
Well, evidently they're vying for this position. Right, Marco Polo, who's this firm that put out this absolute bollocks gish gallop of a report. They are also the people that published Ashley Biden's stolen diary. Now, Ashley Biden is Joe Biden's daughter. Now, this was stolen by two people, Amy Harris and Robert Corilander, and Project Veritas paid these two people $40,000 for this, but then they got cold feet and didn't want to publish it because they realized that it was illegally stolen. So they gave it to Marco Polo, and Marco Polo published it. Now, all that this diary says is that basically Ashley can remember that she was molested when she was a child by a neighbor. And there's also a bit in it where she describes showering with her father. So they're both naked. That's Joe Biden. She's a toddler. He's showering. So what Marco Polo did was mash these two bits together and put out a rumor that the diary showed that Joe Biden molested his daughter.
Shit.
Exactly. So this gives you an idea of the type of people that Marco Polo might be. So again, we're basically getting we've got Miranda Devine, we've got Steve Bannon, we've got Marco Polo, we've got Rudy Giuliani, we've got a whole series of people that have got some incredibly dodgy views on the way that America and indeed the planet should be run, and don't have the best reputation for being honest.
We should also probably mention here Project Veritas were the people who made that fake video where it's they're going to some abortion clinic and they're saying, I'll give you $500 for this sort of baby parts, and it was transportation costs, but they were like, they're selling the dead babies.
Yeah, they do that all the time. Like, he dressed up as a pimp and turned up at a company and basically implied that he would give them. It was Acorn, the company, which was sort of a democratic sort of leaning organisation. He turned up dressed as a pimp in a fur coat and implied that he'd made £1 million or so from trafficking children and prostitution children, and that he wanted to give Acorn this money. And he filmed all this, and the sort of the way that Veritas put it out was that basically, ha ha ha, see this despicable company, they'll take money from anywhere. Did somewhat backfire. He was arrested and charged with being a pimp because Acorn basically turned around and said, right, yeah, we'll definitely take that money. And then the second he got out of the room, they phoned the police. And so it completely backfired. Now, he will still promote that lie, but he did actually, I don't think he did jail time, but he did get a criminal record off the back of that. So again, Project Veritas, not to be trusted. Same thing with Peter Schweitzer, who did that Secret Empires, the American Political Class and How It Hides Corruption. That book that came out in 2018, he's an editor at Breitbart. So again, same people, same connection to the Trump campaign. Interestingly, that book, which seemed to start the Burisma thing, Secret Empires, How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Families and Friends, its conclusion was the Bidens hadn't actually done anything illegal in Ukraine. So the conclusion of the book that started the rumor that basically promotes, and it heavily infers that they did, but it actually says in the book that there's nothing illegal that's been done. And the very same thing with John Solomon, who's the person who prior to the laptop was promoting the idea that Victor Shokin I was going to investigate Hunter Biden. I was going to investigate. Well, it transpires, we already know that Victor Shokin wasn't, but it transpires that he's also admitted this. He said that he lied in court. He was never going to investigate them. And so basically John Solomon's information, which again formed the foundation of the idea, was completely nonsense. Again, John Solomon is a contributor to Fox News. He was a former editor-in-chief of the Washington Times. Now, the Washington Times is like a trash tabloid that designs itself to look like the Washington Post and fool people into thinking it is the Washington Post. Now, here's an interesting thing. Do you know who owns the Washington Times?
I think you mentioned them earlier.
I did. The Moonies.
Yes.
The Moonies own the Washington Times.
Oh, right.
By bizarre coincidence. But anyway, John Solomon is the guy that basically he was behind the lie that the Clintons profited from the sale of Uranium One. Uranium One was an entity that was sold, and the big sort of thing was that the Clinton Foundation had received a huge amount of money from them, and it transpires that none of this is true. That they received some money from somebody who worked for this company but didn't know at the time, and it was nothing. It was a big nothing burger. But according to people, Solomon played an important role in advancing the flawed Trump-friendly tale of corruption in Ukraine involving Biden and his son Hunter, and inspired the effort by Trump to pressure the Ukrainian government into digging up dirt on Trump's rivals. So it turns out that Trump got the idea for that perfect call with Zelensky from reading John Solomon's article. But it transpires that John Solomon's article was not true. So that's where the entire thing started. That's pretty much it. There is one more thing that deserves a bit of attention, but that's essentially that's the meat. That's where it came from. It's the idea that he paid off the Ukrainian government, or blackmailed them to get this prosecutor rid of, and that there was some sort of dodginess in CFC, and then there's all the sort of silliness containing like child porn and stuff like that. Transpires that absolutely none of it is true. So there's absolutely nothing on there on Hunter Biden's laptop, whether it be real or not, that is incriminating or shows any level of corruption, aside from the sort of nepotism and, rich people giving their kids a huge amount of money to do jobs that they're not actually qualified for. But fucking hell, these lads I went to school with that work for their dad's construction firm that I wouldn't trust to make me a cup of coffee, and they're in charge millions of pounds every year. So it's not like this is relegated to the Bidens or even relegated to politics even. It's just the way of the world.
Totally.
Anywho, so where did Rudy Giuliani, because Rudy Giuliani's been in the Ukraine looking at this since about 2018. Why? Who is it? And why is Rudy Giuliani? Well, it turns out that he was influenced heavily by a bloke called Andrzej Derkach and also a bloke called Vitaly Prus. Who are these people? Derkach is a KGB agent. His father was a KGB agent. His father actually worked on, the Satan long-range missiles that we're all terrified of from the Soviet Union. That's what Andrzej Derkach's father was working on. He was working on the Satan missiles program. Anyway, in autumn 2019, so this is before he's actually received the laptop from Hunter Biden, from John McIsaac, Derkach has met with Giuliani in the Ukraine. And Rudy has been over there for about a year now looking for dirt on the Bidens in Ukraine. And Derkach is the person that, produced that fake tape of Biden talking to Poroshenko, but also he's the person that told Rudy Giuliani, go and look at Burisma. Go and look at Burisma. And this may have even predated John Solomon writing about it. I'm not entirely sure of the dates, but this is where it's coming from. So in 2019, Derkach holds a press conference and he explains his theory, which he calls demo corruption. Now, see if you can, you might have to play conspiracy theory bingo a little bit here. He said that the Biden family is involved in a corrupt money laundering business scheme in the Ukraine that's ultimately directed by George Soros.
Ding.
Hey, that's a bingo.
Exactly.
Is Bill Gates going to come up in a minute?
No, unfortunately we didn't. But we've gone all the way through without even a hint of anti-Semitism. Well, maybe the Kanye West bit at the beginning, but we've gone through the entire sort of theory without it. But then it raises its head.
That feels like they just wedged that in for completeness. They
Of course
had
they did.
Everything there. It's just like, man, we did all this. There's no source. Shit, what are we going to do?
Well,
it's the capstone on the pyramid, isn't it? Here we go.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because again, that gives a bearing on the entire theory itself. Because again, if they're willing to sort of mash in crap like that, and this is where it came from, he also said that it was the Ukraine not Russia, that interfered with the 2016 election. And they tried to help Hillary Clinton. That's bollocks. And he's a KGB agent, so I wouldn't believe him as far as I could fucking throw him. But basically, he graduated from the KGB after enrolling in the KGB school in 1990. And apparently, he's friends with Putin, by which I mean he goes to the pub with Putin. Like he's not like friends with Putin like Donald Trump's friends with Putin. Like he's friends with Putin like that, as in like, you know, they've probably had sleepovers and stuff like that. But
I wonder if he's seen Putin shit himself. Because that was an excellent rumor that went around that I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, again, I want it to be true, so it's true.
I want to believe too.
Now, again, Lev Parnas, who's a very mysterious person, has also told Politico that Rudy Giuliani knew about Hunter's corruption in early 2019 because of his friend, Vitaly Prus. Who's Vitaly Prus? Well, Vitaly Prus is connected to a firm called Tri-Global Strategic Ventures. He's on the board of this firm. Now, Rudy Giuliani has been involved in this firm that is based in Armenia and the Ukraine, TGSV, since as early as 2003. Now, they help Western companies invest in Russia. But interestingly, TGSV was on the list of companies that is sanctioned by the West ever since the Russian government invaded the Crimea. So Rudy Giuliani has been dealing with a Russian company that is connected with certain KGB agents like Vitaly Prus and Andrei Derkach since 2003. And this is where he got the idea to investigate Hunter Biden's and the Biden's family's corruption in Ukraine. Now, in 2018, Rudy went to Armenia. He was invited there by a bloke called Aya Abramaya, who is also a Russian, who helped construct the Kremlin and was given a Merit to the Fatherland award by Putin. And Abramayan basically asked Rudy to take a message to Trump. Now, the message was via the board of Tri-Global Strategic Ventures, but via Vitaly Prus. What was the message that was given by this Russian guy to Rudy Giuliani, this Russian guy that had been, shall we use the word, grooming Rudy Giuliani since the early 2000s? This message that came via two KGB agents was, investigate the Biden's corruption in the Ukraine. That is the message that came from it. In 2017, Pavel Fuchs, who's a Ukrainian oligarch and a pro-Russian, also hired Rudy Giuliani's security firm. And Fuchs is also said to send huge amounts of money to the Trump campaign. Fuchs also was the person, can you remember the failed Trump Tower Moscow, in which he went there, in which the dossier claimed that he was getting prostitutes to piss on beds and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That was arranged by Pavel Fuchs. Pavel Fuchs is a businessman, a Ukrainian oligarch, pro-Russian, that exclusively uses firms by Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani, who's been in the Ukraine since 2003, being groomed by at least two KGB agents. So Vitaly Prus of the TGSV, he's also basically, he's Belarus. He lives in New York, but he's actually Belarus born. Now, he happens to be friends with Mykola Zlokevsky, who's the owner of Burisma. But he also has worked on several Russian state-owned gas companies, including Transneft and various others. He's known Rudy since 2003, and he got Rudy to speak at various venues in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. He also was the person to introduce Rudy Giuliani to former Ukrainian President Poroshenko, and he booked him to speak at a Kremlin-backed security conference in Armenia in both 2017 and 2018. And it was under Vitaly Prus's invitation that Rudy took One American Networks over to Ukraine, where they met with Derkach and were given the fake recording of Biden talking with Poroshenko. Now, here's a very interesting thing that happened. In January 2019, the Russian government was found to have hacked Burisma. This is a fact. It's not contested by the Russian government. The Russian government, for whatever reason, hacked Burisma. And then just a few months later, the laptop turned up.
Interesting.
That is very interesting.
Very interesting, isn't it? Now, I'm not suggesting, yes, I am. I'm heavily inferring that what could have happened is that Russia could have hacked the contents and then arranged it to be released. It certainly looks like Russia's got some sort of hand in it, because basically, like, Rudy Giuliani is basically being led around by at least 3 people connected to the KGB who have been sponsoring his businesses for the last 20 years. And again, all of these terrible, terrible revelations that have supposedly come out of this laptop, not one of them actually shows any degree of illegal activity or anything that is actually could be considered corruption. Is that all connected with the Ukraine and Russia? Potentially, very, very potentially. You can only speculate on that. And I hate to fall into the Russian disinformation, because there's a degree of reality to it. Okay, but I think there's also a degree of Russian misinformation and disinformation that Rudy Giuliani and certain other people are more than happy to take on face value, shall we say?
Yeah, agreed.
So that is the story of Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm afraid there's not really an awful lot there. And so remember that when they go mental over the next few months, because they are going to go mental with it. They're going to really try and push this. They're going to try and make this into Benghazi 2 or Clinton's emails 2. And again, they're good comparisons because nothing actually happened in either of those incidents. But also remember that they've already investigated the laptop. So all of this, we need to probe into the laptop. You've done it at least 5 times. They've investigated it. And if they've had the laptop and they've had the reports and they've had it, all the evidence for as long as they've had, and as you quite rightly said, Stars, it's quite difficult to actually debunk it because you need to know the intricacies of the timeline and everything else. The reason we know it's bollocks is because they really haven't pushed it. They really haven't pushed it. The only thing that they've pushed it about is this silly meeting and this 10% for the big guy. And if after 2 years that's all they've got nothing.
So here's the thing, right? The same people are going to turn up with some more bullshit about something else in a year or two's time, and I'm sure if we look backwards, in time, it's a weird way of putting it, but whatever. If we look into the past, we'll discover that these guys will have been putting forward bullshit for years.
Yeah.
And may I use a sporting analogy?
Mm-hmm.
So, in Formula 1, years ago, the tracks, whenever you went off the line, had a gravel trap.
Yeah.
So if you went off the racing circuit, if you ran wide, you went through a gravel trap, and maybe your car got beached in it, maybe you lost time. It was discovered that it was actually safer just to tarmac that as well, because your brakes work properly, so on. You'd have less chance of landing up in the wall or getting flipped or whatever. The problem with that was that there was no penalty for car running wide.
Right.
So particularly in the first time that the Indy cars, which is a different formula, raced at the Circuit of Americas, which is a circuit which was made for Formula 1, they all ran wide at every corner, no problem at all, and the whole thing was ridiculous. So the FIA, which is the governing body of Formula 1, now has got very strict rules about this. At certain corners, they'll look and they'll see if the car goes wide there, they'll get an advantage. So we'll penalise them. They'll get a penalty. They'll get, if it's qualifying, they'll get laps removed from them, and so on. What strikes me about this stuff is that people can just fire shit out, and maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
But there's no penalty against their reputation. There's no lap time getting deleted. There's no 5-second penalty. They can just go again and again and again. There's no gravel trap.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I think it's a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. People were just prepared to believe lies. And yeah, the very same people, they're the people that came up with Pizzagate. They're the people that came up with Uranium One. They're the people that talked about Benghazi. They're the people that they're actually the people behind the Clinton Chronicles. I don't know if anyone remembers that doozy from back in the past.
Yeah.
Like listing all the women that he supposedly raped and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, with all of these things, like the important thing to do, right, is take the tiniest hint of truth. For example, Hillary Clinton actually did go to that pizza place. There's no paedophilic ring going on there, but she did actually go to the pizza place. Like, you know, there was some debacle with Benghazi. She did get into bother with her emails. Now, again, if you actually look into all of these things, you find out. I saw someone the other day. Now we know that Hunter Biden's laptop's real. Now investigate Hillary Clinton's emails. So they did. They've done it. They did it fucking years ago. They've done it. They've done it. Like, there was nothing there. But people don't know that.
I will say on Hillary Clinton's emails, the fact that she had her own server, I don't care. I don't care if every email that went through that was perfectly lovely and fine. And I know that politicians have done this, a few times. They should get absolutely hammered for that from a data security perspective, from an archiving perspective. It's ridiculous. Now, that's not to say that people aren't full of shit whenever they talk about it, but she should have been hammered for that, as should everybody in that role. You see, if I started using my personal email for work,
totally.
I'd also kick my ass, and we don't even have like this sort of archiving stuff.
The theory regarding her emails was that basically they were classified, and they weren't. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but the Too Long Didn't Read is basically no, they weren't. No, they weren't. So, yeah. But again, as you say, this is the problem. You can just throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks, and it becomes a truism. And in many ways, that is kind of why we're doing this in a broader sense, because we found, like, even with things that we thought we knew about, that like Bohemian Grove and stuff like that, there's certain truisms, like Alex was the first person to ever get inside there, and then we find out that news crews have been in there 5-6 times before and filmed, like, The Ritual, for example, and stuff like that. So this is again, as you say, the problem with it's an information war. Oh, it's an info war. Like, there is an element of corruption. There's no way Hunter Biden should be working for a company that has got that degree of corruption for it. Not because it's illegal, just because it looks bad. It looks bad. Right, okay. And if there's the whiff of corruption, you know what people say, no smoke without fire. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, but it's that hint of truth. I'll put it this way. If Hunter Biden never worked for that corrupt firm, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So, and that is the problem. But also, and there's a tribalism, in as much as a lot of people really do believe that Trump's phone call was fine when the evidence shows that it wasn't, and that the reason that they're telling you it wasn't was because Joe Biden did exactly the same thing in Ukraine in order to protect his son, but he didn't. It just isn't true.
So, as for the claim that the movie makes, that this would have completely decimated Biden's election?
If it had got enough traction, because I strongly believe that even though Pizzagate is utter shite, that to a degree that informed some voters who are like, "Ooh, paedophilia! I don't want to be involved in anything like that." So there might be somebody that basically, like, the concept of Hunter Biden's laptop. I'm sure there's people that believe that it is, but I think a lot of those people would have voted for Trump in the first place anyway. So, like, the long and short of it is that not if anybody had actually looked into what had actually happened. There's no way it would have, like, could it have caused a blip? Like, yeah, potentially. Like, because there's always been crap that's floated around that then later turns out not to be true, but people go with it or whatnot. But only in that regard, only in regard of if enough people believed it. The actual meat and potatoes of what is on that laptop, it's, to coin a MAGA phrase, it's a nothing burger.
Yeah, I think at every single step of this, like, when you present something, it sounds exciting, and then it's a nothing. It's just like, it's just a letdown at every single stage. There's nothing there.
I am sorry, but I did my best.
Please don't do an episode into Putin falling down the stairs and shitting his pants.
Oh, we're doing that next.
How did you know?
Please conclude that it's true.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Can you tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, I'm on twitter.com/starsofcovid, and you will also find me as one of the 3 presenters of the Lads on Tour podcast, alongside Ivor and Brent, who you have heard from as well today, obviously. And I really concentrate mostly on countering COVID-related misinformation, hence the name Stars of COVID.
Yeah, so and I'm ivermectin, that's also a satirical name about COVID. And yeah, so I'll have my book out. We already talked about that. Well, the second edition of my book out. And yeah, I'm available on Twitter at ivermectin1. And yeah, you can find me also on Odyssey, where I've done some really long videos like this one will inevitably be about Michael Yeadon and Claire Craig. I still need to finish one of them, actually. So
when you say finish one of them, do you mean murder either Claire Craig or Michael Yeadon?
No, I don't mean that.
Oh, well, I mean, fair enough. Well, if you change your mind, I've got a van.
The next episode, actually, of the Lads on Tour podcast, we should mention, does involve Jordan Wilden of Logically. So as soon as I get a file from Brent, we'll be uploading that to the internet for everyone to hear. No pressure, Brent.
None taken.
I'm sure this one will take hours to edit, yeah.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, sound. So that wraps up the year. We've had a great year together, and I wanted to say thank you to all 3 of you, actually. That's why I wanted to do this episode at the end of the year. You guys have played a massive part in my journey, and seriously, humbly, thank you for being a part of that.
That was a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. And it's been a good, well, it's been a shit year.
It's an interesting,
but yeah, it's been interesting. Yeah, but it's been great. It's been great to be involved with you guys over the last year as a sort of regular co-host with Brent and Ivor, and occasionally appearing alongside Neil on bits and pieces. Yeah, it's been lots of fun, actually.
It really has, yeah.
It sure has.